Welcome everyone to the Yountville Town Council meeting for Tuesday, April 18th, 2017. Go ahead and call this meeting to order. And we may have some of these seats up front open up early in the meeting, so if that is in fact the case, then feel free to take a seat if you're standing. Roll call, please.
Here.
Councilmember Dorman.
Here.
Councilmember Moeller.
Here.
Vice Mayor Dornbecker.
Here.
Mayor Dunbar.
Here. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up is the adoption of our agenda this evening. Is there a motion for adoption of the agenda?
Mayor, I believe 2 items were going to be removed from the consent agenda.
We'll do that
we do
when
that
we
now,
get to
or?
the consent calendar
Okay.
in just
Then
a second.
I
Yeah.
move we adopt the agenda.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That passes, and we are stalling for dramatic effect for the Steen family. There they are. Well, you know how to make an entrance, don't you? Man. Well, you don't even sit down because I'm about to ask you to just to get up because I'm going to meet you at the podium and present a proclamation, and then we have another little special gift to give you as well. Everyone is here for you.
Thank you. Very kind of you. I know they're not here just for me. Thank you, John.
They should be.
Yes.
So it's my pleasure on behalf of the Town Council to read this proclamation honoring Jeff Steen and Pacific Blues Cafe. Whereas Jeff Steen has been an integral part of the Yountville restaurant scene since the late 1980s, first as general manager of Compadres Grill, and then in September of 1996, taking over as the proprietor of the 100-seat Pacific Blues Cafe after the closure of Vintage Cafe. Whereas Pacific Blues Cafe has been a family-owned and operated business serving the Yountville community for more than 20 years from its former train depot location on Washington Street, located on the grounds of the Vintage Estate property. Whereas Pacific Blues Cafe has been a popular Yountville casual dining spot with a crowd of local residents that regularly could be found there enjoying morning coffee or breakfast, out on the front deck at lunch and dinner, watching the comings and goings along Washington Street. Whereas Jeff Steen and Pacific Blues Cafe are generous community partners supporting Yountville nonprofits like the Chamber of Commerce, Yountville Little League, Yountville Kiwanis Club, Yountville Elementary School, the Yountville Arts Commission, the California Veterans Home, and the Pathway Home, just to name a few. Whereas many Yountville residents have fond memories of enjoying a beverage or two, sharing a meal, celebrating special moments, or just hanging out at Pacific Blues. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Mayor John F. Dunbar, on behalf of the Town Council and the entire Yountville community, extend with great affection our sincere appreciation to Jeff, the Steen family, and the entire Pacific Blues team for their many contributions to Yountville over the years. So let's get a picture with Sharon. Yeah, definitely. That's okay. So I welcome you to share some remarks. After you give some remarks, Carl Johnson has a little something also to present to you. So
Is that a rebuttal then, or what is it?
yeah.
Want me to do that or wait for Carl?
Either way.
Oh, I don't.
You go first.
Well, I'm sorry to be a little late here. We were in the process of cleaning out things and seeing a lot of memories left over, and pulling it out and then rethinking everything that has been done over 21 years. And we are very fortunate, as I said in our party last Tuesday when everybody showed up for the town party. We are very fortunate to have a town like this respond to our business from day one, and I am very lucky to have a following at the Blues, which made it so successful, and a great staff and fun people and a community that really cared about the environment, what we created there, and what we tried to be, as I call it, the cheers of Yountville, so to speak, for so many years. And it just, I have my emotions up and down in the last few weeks, but all in all, and especially after our finishing these last couple of weeks, I'm happy. I'm happy how it came forth, how it went through everything, how we enjoyed everything that we've done, and I have nothing but fond memories of the whole town, and I just love you all. Thank you so much.
So I invite Carl Johnson up, please.
After seeing all the letters in the Sun last week,
What?
how deeply you moved so many people in this community, I don't want that memory to fade like the newsprint does. So this
Oh my!
is for you.
Oh, that's so cool.
This is the 2 pages of letters
I know. That's
done
so
in good,
great.
long print. It's
Oh,
going
my
to
goodness.
outlast newsprint by a long
Yeah.
time, but it won't outlast your memories.
Make my kids hang it in their houses.
So Carl, if you could turn to Sharon and get a photo. So I'm thinking this might make the Yountville Sun.
Thank you, Carl. This is really special. And we were trying to figure out actually how we were going to do this, and we have a stack of papers at home. Do we cut them up? Do we do the collage look? How are we going to do this? And then the day that it came out, and the day of the party, actually this came out afterwards, but the day of the party, everybody, Bonnie and everybody that planned the party in the town, they did paper on the table, so people signed certain things on the table. So it was really cute because all of the papers, we had various messages from artwork to funny things to sad things to whatever it be. And so we literally sat in our bed the next morning crying as we were trying to cut these things out and figure out how we were going to lay it, and then we just said, oh, forget it, we'll just keep the whole thing. And it was, and then the same thing after reading this Thursday night when the newspaper came out and trying to figure out, it's just great. I mean, I'm very fortunate to have people around me like this. Yeah.
We're fortunate to have someone like you, aren't we?
Thank you, I appreciate it. Very nice.
Thanks very much. Now, we also recognize you've had a very long day at the restaurant already. You're free to stay as long as you'd like tonight, but you're not obligated to stay any longer than right now. And I'm sure you can negotiate. You can negotiate with some of the folks standing in the back to get front row seats for the rest of our meeting too. But
We have a few things to do, so.
thank you for being here, letting us recognize you. Now, if there is anyone that in particular needs to sit down, we do have 4 seats in the front that are available as we move ahead in our meeting. Next up, we have public comment. It's not the public comment you want. It's the public comment that, well, maybe you do. Any item that's not on our agenda tonight, because I know I see a lot of faces that probably have never been in this room before, that come from various areas in the North Bay. And so you may or may not be aware of how we work the agenda. So this is an item, anything that's not on tonight's agenda, if you'd like to address the council, now would be the time. All right, we'll move right ahead. Yes, no, no, okay. There will be public comment portions of the items that I'm sure most of you are here for. We're going to move ahead to our consent calendar, and we've had 2 items requested for removal, items 7A and 7B, for either clarification or discussion. So we are, I'm entertaining a motion for consent calendar items C, D, and E, if there is such a motion.
I make a motion, we approve consent items B, C, and D. C, D, and E.
C, D, and E, okay.
C,
I'll
D, and E.
second.
Get that. Okay. And we're just trying our vote casting. Okay, please cast your vote for those three items, C, D, and E. There we go. And Councilmember Durham's tablet is not working tonight, so it's not that he's not voting.
Oh, I did click you. I wanted to say that.
That passes unanimously, though. Okay, so we're going to now move to item 7A. And I know there was a question that was presented from members of the public regarding this item, which is the second reading and potential adoption of the ordinance related to second residential units. So I'm not sure who's going to start with. I know Councilmember Dorman, you were familiar with one of the requests from the general public, or a member from the public that's here that has brought up this issue.
Right. Thank you, Mayor. I have, we all received an email, and I passed on to our town attorney a resident question whether the statute or the ordinance is going to be retroactive to all second units in town, or does it apply only to new second units? And that's really there are several specific questions, but that's really the origin question, and I have had a chance to talk to town attorney about that, and so I think he is prepared to respond if council.
Okay.
Yes, Mayor and council members. The ordinance itself will apply to all second residential units in town going forward. So design standards, setbacks, building heights, all of those new requirements will apply to all new applications for a second residential unit in town. To the extent there are existing second residential units that were developed under previous standards, those would now be legal non-conforming uses because they did comply with the standards that were in effect at the time. And now those standards have changed. There are some requirements in the ordinance that would apply to previously approved second residential units, including the 90-day rental requirement and the owner occupancy requirement. And I think previously, because short-term rentals, 30 or fewer days, were banned, it's a similar requirement here. So it's gone from 30 to 90 for second residential units under this ordinance as it reads.
And the intent, could you speak to the intent as it was discussed of why that 90-day period was created?
I might defer to the planning director who was at the ZDRB meeting when this was discussed.
That was an issue that first arose at the ZDRB, and the feeling was that a 90-day rental would be more of a long-term tenant, whereas a 30-day rental could be a longer-term vacation rental, and the desire for these backyard units would be for a longer-term tenant.
And if I remember also, the council discussion included the desire to maintain and provide workforce and more affordable
Right.
housing rentals for long-term, potentially long-term
Correct.
tenants, not vacations.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the council about that?
But I just want to clarify that the existing second units now will not have to follow that. They will not have to be rented for 90 days or
No,
longer.
that's incorrect. The new rules for second dwellings will apply, and that's the 90-day minimum will apply to all units in town, including those already existing.
There are other components of the ordinance that do not apply to existing, but the 90-day minimum occupancy would. I clarify that.
Mayor, Council, if I would say, we want to clarify that is for second units. It doesn't apply to a primary unit.
And I think, again, if I remember correctly, the council discussion was we changed from the primary unit being owner-occupied, and so we wanted to make sure that we didn't now create a situation where there were two vacation rentals basically on one property, that one of them needed to be a longer-standing rental. Is that accurate?
Right. Either the primary or the secondary unit must be owner occupied, and the other can be the more of a short-term rental as long as it's 90 days. So
Yeah.
not a short-term rental, but at
More,
least 90
more
days.
transient, though, potentially.
Yes.
Okay. So any member of the public that needs to speak to this item, please come forward. Ms. Reeves, I believe you were one of the two members of the public that emailed us.
Yes, Pam Reeves, 6887 Jefferson Street. I raised the question because I think that, like the next consent calendar item that will be taken off the consent calendar, there hasn't been enough notice in town to allow property owners to really understand this ordinance and how it might affect them. And I think that a lot of people would be a little bit upset that if they were going to build a second unit, or if they already had a second unit, the rules are different for them than for regular houses in town. And I think that it's discriminatory. It's much more onerous than the 30-day. And I think that we can't legislate the circumstances of the property owner, whether or not they have to recoup a certain amount of money for the build out or whatever it is, whatever their life circumstance happens to be, that this restriction is a kind of an onerous extra regulation. And I think I understand that the second unit ordinance is to create workforce housing, and hopefully that will be the result of it. But I think that the idea that we can legislate that is erroneous, and I would like to see this item delayed and noticed through the paper and through whatever other means. I would do a mailing to everyone so that they have a chance to weigh in on this and possibly suggest other ways of accomplishing this. Thank you.
Thank you. And if the town attorney or town manager could speak to the noticing process and how legally compliant that process was.
I think the first thing we have to point out is that this particular ordinance started with the Zoning and Design Review Board, which is a citizen-appointed advisory committee, and those notices, there's been extensive coverage in the Yountville Sun, and then we also have the April 4th council meeting and all the noticing that went out with that agenda, and then on the April 18th. So I think the issue of noticing, in terms of that, we are more in compliance than state law requires. The Sun has been covering this particular item. The council has actually weighed in and had a significant discussion on April 4th, trying to interpret what the citizens on the advisory committee, because that recommendation came from the members of the ZDRB. So certainly it's something that the council could look at changing simply back to the 30-day, if that is something the council wanted to do. But as far as minimum noticing requirements, certainly you have the option of continuing an item to another point in time. But as far as an opportunity to notice, we have e-notifier, we have it on our website, we have a lot of, in our 3 community posting boards, so, as well as the Yountville Sun. So it's been out there. I do think, we face the challenge of there's always somebody that hasn't heard about it until now, or somebody else, and I don't know. We struggle, and I certainly welcome anybody's ideas on how to better improve the communications process.
Did you want to add anything, town attorney?
I would just confirm that. I think that as a zoning ordinance, this was noticed at least 10 days before the ZDRB meeting and at least 10 days before the meeting here for the first reading, and a public hearing was held on this as well.
And there was a vote 4 in favor, 1 opposed at that April 4th.
Correct.
Okay. Councilmember Durham?
And this whole ordinance came to us from the state, correct? Because of their second unit requirements, correct?
Yep.
We're changing, so therefore the town had to discuss how it would affect them.
Yeah, that's correct. This was a bill that was passed and signed into law last year by Governor Brown. It was effective January 1 of this year, and it said that any provisions of the town ordinance that were in conflict with the state law were automatically null and void. So these revisions bring it in line with those state law requirements to prevent the situation where something becomes null and void as a result of state law.
And if I remember correctly, because of that, it was also on an agenda item well before April 4th, because we had to do an emergency ordinance to put it in place so we could further discuss it.
That's correct.
So
Yes.
it's been going on much longer than April 4th, correct?
Yes, I think December 6th was
Yeah.
the first time that the council considered this so that we could make the January 1 deadline.
Thank
It-
you.
Yes.
I can share a few more of those dates. It was in December that the urgency ordinance came to the council and the ZDRB. The urgency ordinance came back to the council in January. Then in March, the ZDRB heard the non-urgency ordinance, and that's the one that is now before you for the second time.
Okay. Any other questions from council of staff on that explanation? Vice Mayor?
I do have a question, and that is, in the state version that we had to pass in the urgency, did it mandate 90-day rental?
No, that is a local provision that is added. Our our second dwelling ordinance complies with the state requirements, but it's not a carbon copy. We've added a few provisions that are unique to us. One is that the unit requires a washer-dryer hookup. Another is this optional owner occupancy, and another would be the 90 days.
So that's on top of the state requirements.
Yeah, that's correct. State law makes those provisions optional, so that is true.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public before I invite? Yes, please.
I have just a couple of comments.
If you could
about-
identify yourself for us,
I'm
please.
sorry, Don Judah,
Thank you, Don.
and I'm a property owner here in Yountville. And the ordinance that I read both the state and the assembly bills, they both had to pass in order for this to be in effect. But the intent of that was to provide more opportunities for affordable housing by having second units built. But I believe this ordinance will actually reduce the number in Yountville. And the reason for that is that I think that the stipulation of owner-occupied is the sticker here. The state, if you look at section 6 of the state amendment, it says no additional standards other than those provided in this subdivision shall be utilized or imposed except that a local agency may require an applicant permit issued pursuant to the subdivision be owner occupant. It didn't mandate this. Everything else was mandated, but that was an opportunity to say, okay, we need this or we don't need this. Just briefly a history. In the 80s, I bought a piece of property on Yount Street in Old Town, and we developed a unit with what at that time was called a granny unit. It went through a design review process at that time by a consulting architect. And at the end of the meeting, the council decided that it should be owner occupied as a matter of a use permit on that property. And that we continued to rent that way with my son, who was an owner also living in that property. Now, years passed, and I believe it was about maybe 1990, approaching that time, because of the demands put on communities to add more housing to their jurisdictions, they reduced or removed that portion of the stipulation to be owner occupied to stimulate more housing in Yountville, and that is what happened. And subsequent to that, if you look at the subdivisions and individual buildings built in Old Town, there's a number of them with second residential units. Now, I know there are also a lot of units in this town that are owned, and both units are rented out. I mean, we did that after the 1990 rule. If you take that away, it's going to force the owner to either move into one of the units in order to be able to rent the other one. And this is going to reduce the number of available houses in Yountville. Anyway, I want to point that out, that I think that one provision of this particular ordinance on the housing, it's fine to come into compliance with what is a minimum requirement from the state, but I think this is reaching backwards to where we were back in the 1980s. And I think it'd be nice if that could be removed from the ordinance. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Yes, first speakers before anybody gets revisited here. And the town clerk will be keeping time for speakers. 3 minutes maximum.
Claudia Sierra. Myself and Bank of the West own a house over on Monroe Street that's been a rental for some 20 years. My friends refer to that house as the African Queen because every time someone moves into it, there's broken windows, there's broken doors, there's broken cupboards, there's scratched new wooden floors. There's this last go-round, I was like sitting in a puddle of tears going, well, I have to sell it because I can't keep doing this. So I talked to a neighbor who has a VRBO, and they explained that, you know, it was a 1 month situation. You had to rent it 30 days, but you could put furniture in there, put everything down to a cherry pitter in there to make your kitchen very accessible, and people would come and rent it for much more money than you could get as a month-to-month rental, and you would have a finger on the pulse of what's going on in your house.
Are you speaking specifically to this ordinance we're talking about, which is a second unit ordinance? It's not the rental ordinance that's following this
90
item.
days is sort of confusing because I thought about this, and I went down to the community hall and I talked to the woman and I said, do I need a permit to do this? What are the stipulations? And it was explained to me that they had to stay 30 days. And
I think you're talking specifically about just renting a residence. Is that accurate?
yes.
Yeah, what we're talking about here is renting second units. So if you have a house and you have a second building, granny unit, in-law unit, above the garage, that type of thing, we're talking about how we are regulating that second unit, not a primary rental property.
Well, I would also like you to address what will happen after taking out a first mortgage and going on board with this vacation rental by owner. I'd like to know how that's going to go because it seems like the rules kind of changed.
Yeah,
And,
that isn't the item that we're talking about right now.
Well, when I heard about this meeting, I went down and talked to them, and someone came out and explained to me that it was going to be very different. So
Okay,
I'm confused.
okay, thank you. Yes. Ms. Khan, hello.
Hello, Eve Khan. I'm a Napa resident and a local realtor. I have a question. When you talk about workforce housing, I'm hoping that you do a little research because I know that there are wineries, there's the CIA who brings in chefs for limited classes. I don't know that those short-term assignments would fit into the description you have. If they're 60 days or 75 days and you have a 90-day minimum. So I'm concerned that you're putting, one of the early speakers talked about restrictions. So there are workforce people who don't fit into a specific 90-day window. And so I think you really want to understand if, in fact, the workforce that exists in Napa, whether it's for a winery or restaurant or for the CIA, would, in fact, not be able to take advantage of these. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public like to speak on this item? Okay. Pam, I'll let you speak again. Going forward, we're not going to have repeat speakers. You're allowed 3 minutes only on any item. So this exception I'll make, but I know that we have a lot of speakers coming up on the next item.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that I've been through all the meetings on this item, including the ZDRB, and the 90-day restriction came from the last ZDRB and was incorporated into this ordinance that was presented 2 weeks ago. It was not part of the original ordinance, and so I feel like the noticing and the whole run-up of this ordinance is changed and requires more noticing.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one else? Okay. If you're going to make a statement, you need to come up to the microphone and please identify yourself.
John Murphy, 6484 Heather Street. Quick question. I just wonder if that statement was true.
Okay. I'll have staff respond to that.
All right. Let me give a little bit of an overview of what the citizen advisory body's role is. So when a proposal is presented, the citizens on the steering committees and the various advisory committees provide staff and the council with input on what they think could be an improvement, no different than what you all are going to be doing tonight, but they provided input. And I will point out that what you're also hearing in the conversation that the ZDRB had and in some of the participants is a little bit of the current community conversation about rentals, vacation rentals, short-term, and the potential of erosion of rental housing stock and the changing nature of the community. Everybody may not want to appreciate that, but that's been an underlying theme that the council has been hearing in community meetings and workshop is how do we better manage this? And I won't disagree with the challenge of, all right, if the owner occupied, some of those issues the council's been wrestling, ZDRB wrestled with, but they're trying to reconcile the residents of the community that are living here. How are they dealing with the impact of the rentals? Whether it's a long-term rental, because I'll also clarify, Yountville only has rentals. Short-term rentals of less than 30 days are not permitted. We only have a rental. So I just want everybody to realize that that's part of that community conversation, and that input came from the citizen members of the Zoning Design Review Board based on their review and discussion with staff and legal counsel, and it was their recommendation to make the change when it came to the town council.
And specific to the question that was just posed, it's quite common, quite normal that there are modifications to what might be an original ordinance, a draft ordinance that are made during the process, whether it be from ZDIB or even during deliberations with town council. That's the whole point of having a second ordinance reading, or the reading of the ordinance a second time. So there's at least 2 weeks after the first one that says, okay, this is what we said that we want to do. We have to now wait 2 more weeks to another meeting before we can actually finally vote on it.
And just to clarify, the change to 90 days was included in the ordinance provision that went to the council for discussion on 4-4.
Mayor, if I could just share, the ZDRB first gave feedback in December that they'd like to see the 90-day provision, and that's why we included it in the draft ordinance that they heard in March, and which is now before you.
Okay, thank you. So seeing no other members of the public speaking to this item, I'll return the discussion back to council for a vote, or at least a discussion and potential motion. Councilmember Dorman.
Thank you. So I don't think we discussed this possibility in the several other times we've discussed it, in that maybe, I think after talking to the town attorney, there would be a way to have our ordinance address only new units, so that existing units could still rent for 30 days. We would still offer that type of a rental pool. They would be non-owner occupied. So we would still, then that would give us a couple of kinds of housing, and the ADUs under the new ordinance could be owner occupied, one or the other unit, and 90 days to give us a different tier of affordable housing. So I'm just throwing that out. Am I correct, Mr. Bell, that can be done?
Yes, council member, you're correct. There could be added to the ordinance a provision that made clear that all of its provisions applied to second residential units where a permit is issued after the effective date, for example, which is true for an overwhelming majority of the provisions of the ordinance anyway, because to the extent they apply to, like I said, setbacks and height and design standards, a second residential unit that's already built based on old standards would still be allowed to continue in its as-built condition. So we're really only talking about the 90-day provision and the owner-occupied provision.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilmember Durham?
I just need a point of clarification. So if it continues on, our discussion just with the consent, and I voted against it the first time, I'm voting against it the second time, or because it's the consent we're all moving forward? if it's the same thing.
We could modify the language just like any other
Very-
discussion.
I just wanted.
Basically, we've reopened the item and, yes, Gary? Okay. Other discussion, Councilmember Mueller?
I understand that the vast majority of probably the public here is more than likely landlords, and I just want to make a comment on, the rest of the people that do live here full time. We're not really discriminating against those because many people who live here full time were, part time people in the beginning, but I have certainly seen a major change in many neighborhoods over the last decade, and I hear from many residents too about the loss of the fabric of our community in terms of our neighborhoods. So that's why I'm in support of the 3 months. I think that if somebody's here on a temporary basis, like 60 days, it's the landlord could certainly discount the rent, knowing that it's a 3-month minimum, but they just couldn't rent for only 3 months. They could rent it for 2 months, but they couldn't rent again until that third month had passed. So that's why I'm in support of this current ordinance, is to try to achieve that balance both between the landlords and the rental units, as well as the character and the fabric of our community.
Thank you. Vice Mayor, thoughts?
Yes, I do. Looking out at the residents and business people in the audience, and knowing that we are in the process of doing workshops and talking about our general plan, I think this is an issue that should be tabled until we talk about it in the general plan. I think that this is obviously a very important land use issue to everyone in our town. And so in my estimation, I think that there does need to be exploration, and not just for the realtors in the room, but for our residents to know exactly how they perceive what the future of the town of Yountville is going to look like. So in my estimation, I think that we should table this and talk about it with the advisory committee that's appointed and with our residents in that process, personally.
Thank you. A question, Town Attorney. If we were to amend the language to apply the 90-day minimum requirement to only new second units after the date of execution of this, does that constitute changing the content of this, so we'd have to come back with a first reading if this is passed?
Yes, if that change were made tonight, this would be considered a first reading, and we would need to bring it back for a second reading at a future meeting.
Okay. I would support the idea. I think it's a reasonable compromise that Councilmember Dorman is bringing up, that it actually seems to make it a little cleaner to monitor, that all of the new terms would be applicable to second units that are being built going forward. And I still firmly agree with the 90-day period. We have heard from many residents in town, not just outside business interests that are in the room tonight, that are concerned about not having longer term, and in some cases, not all cases, but some cases, workforce housing. It's not just for the CIA. It's not just for lodging and hotel. We are having a hard time finding housing opportunities for young families that can't afford to buy their own house. We are looking for people that maybe are starting, single individuals that are looking for an opportunity and just have limited resources. And so, but we are also responding to a growing concern that we have many more homes than we've ever seen that are going empty because we have so many second and third and fourth and fifth homeowners that are not occupying their own homes. So I would support the modification of the ordinance that Councilmember Dorman was proposing, and then that would require us to have a motion of a first reading of that modified ordinance, if that's the direction of the council. So is there any further discussion on that item? I know if you wanted to speak to that, Councilmember Moeller?
Well, the only comment, question I had for the town attorney, we put an emergency, this was state law effective January 2017 or December 2016. And so we put an emergency order in place, ordinance in place, so that we'd have time to develop this, which we did. So is there any, would there be any legal issue with amending this to the proposed suggestion and doing a first reading again, just in terms of compliance with state law?
Yeah, so there is currently an urgency ordinance that brings the town's municipal code into compliance with state law. That is in effect now, and that will still be in effect through, I believe, September of this year. This ordinance, once adopted, or if adopted, would effectively repeal that urgency ordinance because it deals with the same sections of the municipal code. So currently in compliance through September based on what we already did. And this section, if this were to be added tonight and another first reading tonight, then it would be a second reading at the next or a future meeting.
Potentially May 2nd, and there's no deadline concern.
Correct, because the urgency ordinance is still in place until this, if and when this is adopted.
So based on that, I'm fine with the 3-month proposed for as soon as this passes. So if this is the first reading, we've got 2 weeks for the second reading, and then if I'm correct, it becomes law 30 days after the second reading. So that would be the start date for any second unit having a 3-month minimum rental agreement. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It would be effective 30 days after the
So
second
I'll
reading.
entertain a motion if there is one to be had.
Mayor, if I may propose some language to be added in there so that the council knows what they're...
Just for the record, yes? Okay.
To section 17.116.030, subsection A3, at the end of the existing sentence, add the sentence, this subsection shall only apply to a second residential unit for which an application is approved on or after the effective date of this subsection.
Sounds like legal speak to me. That's right on. Is there a motion to that effect?
So I move first reading and adoption of ordinance 17-459 with the amendment read into the record by the town attorney.
And waive the reading?
Yes, and I waive the reading. Lucky for all of us.
And is there a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. We'll just wait for our vote cast. Please vote.
No.
So that passes the first reading of this modified ordinance passes 3-2. And I don't think we said date certain, but the expectation would be May 2, which is our next regularly scheduled meeting. That's typically what we would do with the second reading. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to our other consent item, 7B, that we chose to pull for further discussion. I think we're starting with the town manager.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and audience. Before you tonight is the second reading of the proposed ordinance 17-460, which would establish the rental registration and inspection program. A little background. The town has heard, as you kind of just shared in your discussion, some of that same concern moved into what was the genesis for the council asking us to do some research and develop this. So the concept is, how do we manage the rentals when we don't know where the rentals are? The town currently has no provision and no program for registering rentals, documenting, or even knowing what property is used as a rental. We've also recently had some issues with some substandard property. The town having to take action on red tagging and some other enforcement activities. And when we were researching, we looked at a number of California, Washington, a number of states for programs to try to address. We looked at some of those program elements, tried to simplify something, and then brought to the council on April 4th a rental registration and inspection program. The council has passed that on first reading on a 3-2 vote with some differences of opinion and concern. Since that time, the council and the town have received a considerable amount of input. And I say that because we've received input from a wide range of folks. As we can see tonight, Norbar, and the Realtor Association, you're very effective at what you're doing in representing the realtor interest. We've also heard from some of our local second homeowners concerned about what that might do to their impact. We've also heard from homeowners that say, what about us? How are we managing this? Similar to the earlier conversation the council had about how are we addressing the issues. We've also heard from Fair Housing Napa Valley that says, yes, something like this is necessary because we do have issues with tenants and tenants' rights and the quality of their condition. So in short, it's a challenging conversation, and I think everybody needs to recognize the reason in which the program moved forward was with good intentions in terms of how to try to provide balance and recognizing a changing environment. What we've learned is that in most cases, the inspection program was the element that was the most concerning. So in simplicity, the ordinance was designed for the purpose of, one, protecting the health, safety, and welfare of all residents of rental properties and the adjacent properties. Secondly, as a tool to help maintain property values and the quality of life within the immediate neighborhoods in which residential rental units are located, as well as a mechanism to be aware of which properties are rental units and how they're rented, such as short-term vacation rentals, and also to provide minimum standards for all residential rented units, structures, and premises. What we've heard from most people is that it's maybe going a little too far. Yountville doesn't necessarily need the inspection program. Some folks say, we don't even want the registration, but I think there's more recognition that maybe there is an issue there, but maybe the inspection could be waived or the program could be restructured so that we find out where we're at. Do we really have a need to move there? Staff's done some evaluation, and one of the things that we could suggest to the council is that by eliminating the inspection program elements, we still have a very helpful resource. We would then, the rental registration would be much more like akin to a home business occupation permit. Right now, we require anybody in the town of Yountville that is an attorney working out of their house, a home baker, a home esthetician, a whole range of things, wine brokers and various things, they have to apply for a permit and get a condition. So we've done some analysis, listening to some of the input. We think that that might be a better first step to propose to you, is that we focus on the registration, the rental registration, and then being able to monitor the properties. And then we do have, as some of the respondents indicated, there are tools that maybe we should use in those cases where the situation warrants, and not try to address everybody when one fell swoop. So staff's given some consideration to that. We offer that. I know that the town attorney has prepared for you a red line version of what the proposed ordinance would look like, eliminating the references to the inspection element, and he's prepared to discuss that. So that's just something for your consideration as you move forward with your discussion tonight.
And if the direction of the council is the modified version, we'd go through the same step we just went through, which is not moving forward on a second reading because of substantive content change, so it would be back to a first reading of a modified ordinance.
Correct, and I'm sorry, Mayor, I forgot two elements that I'd been asked to provide. One, and to clarify, because there's been some misrepresentation on some of the fees and costs. One, the annual registration is $85. $85 a year, less actually than in many cases. There was a proposed 330 inspection fee, and that would have been good for a 2-year period. We were also asked locally, what are other communities doing? Calistoga has a requirement under their business license section that any landlord has to have a business license to rent. The city of Napa has a similar structure, but for 5-unit minimum. And also there's been some clarification that I want to do on the municipal fine structure. Fines start at 100 and I'll go up to a maximum of 1,000. They do not start at 1,000, and we start by trying to, the council's direction to staff is to seek compliance, so we generally start with an advisory letter without even a fine, but it goes up to, it starts at 100, moves up to 1,000. So just some clarification, because I do think there was some misinformation filtered out there. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
And that fee structure you just identified, the $100 a day up to $1,000 a day, if continued violation, is the same for a myriad
That is
ordinances.
the municipal fine structure for the town of Yountville.
Not just this one
all of our
instance.
administrative elements, correct.
Okay. Any other questions of the staff presentation by the council? Councilmember Moeller.
Just one comment on that. I mean, actually, we've got a multi-part system before we get to any kind of financial fine. It's not just one letter and then a fine can occur. There's actually 5 or 6 steps, I believe, before, you know, something like that. I really don't have the details off the top of my head. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but oh, you do remember?
Yes.
Okay, well, maybe our town attorney could address that. So just so everybody knows, it's not quite as punitive as some people have led others to believe.
So for administrative enforcement, which is done at the town staff level in-house here, as opposed to an infraction or a misdemeanor enforcement, which requires different mechanisms, it can start with a notice of violation. It can start even before that, simply with educational efforts before a notice of violation, which typically does. Notice of violation simply places the person on notice that there is a violation here, and here are the potential penalties with deadlines to come into compliance. And depending on the severity or the type of violation, it could go directly to a fine in the discretion of staff if the facts warranted it. And it could be anywhere from 100 for the first violation, up to 500, and then up to 1,000 for subsequent violations.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councilor Dorman?
Yes, thank you. I think this, that goes to my question. The proposed ordinance, section 8.08.080A talks about a violation of this chapter shall be subject to administrative enforcement under chapter 8.05 of this code and any other enforcement remedies available under law and this code. So is that the notice provision you're talking about?
That's correct. Chapter 8.05 is administrative enforcement.
Okay, and then we have B in there, administrative penalty, notwithstanding any other provision of this code to the contrary, a violation of any provision of this chapter shall, mandatory, be subject to an administrative penalty not exceeding $1,000 per day. So how do those two work together with our education, notice, discretionary kind of fines?
So there's different tools for enforcement that can be used, and depending on which ones want to be that the town or the council wants to use for a particular ordinance, it can be spelled out specifically. So in this case, the municipal code has a general penalty at the beginning that says any violation of this code is a misdemeanor or an infraction in the discretion of the town. To make clear, though, that there weren't going to be criminal penalties for this particular ordinance, particularly because there were inspection requirements involved, and we didn't want to do any criminal enforcement. We tried to spell out and make it clear that it was administrative enforcement and administrative penalties, and not the more general penalty for violating the municipal code, which could include a misdemeanor.
But as I read B, it says a violation shall be subject to an administrative penalty. So doesn't that take some of the town's discretion away to be able to say, look, we want to educate, we want to give a notice, we feel like you get a second, third, fourth chance for whatever reason? I mean, I guess I'm asking, do we need B?
Well, the town always retains prosecutorial discretion to decide whether or not to enforce a particular penalty under an ordinance. So whether or not to actually enforce B as to any given situation, there's broad prosecutorial discretion there on determining what the fine amount should be and whether or not to impose it in the first place. But you're right, Chapter 8.05 does talk about administrative penalties not exceeding $1,000, but it also talks about a lot of other penalties in general. And so to spell out specifically for this one that it was just administrative, I think that was the intent of including it.
And the administrative doesn't bother me, it's the shall be subject.
Right. And I
So does
think-
that say we must impose a fine?
No, it does
Okay.
not. And that's, in fact, that's how the other penalty provisions of the municipal code use the shall as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff at this point? Before I invite, I'm guessing somebody might have a comment or two on this item. I'm going to just remind folks that are unfamiliar with the Yountville Council Chambers. We will be limiting to 3 minutes. You'll have one opportunity to speak for up to 3 minutes. You don't get to give your time to somebody else. That's on TV. Also, as the town manager mentioned, there have been some misrepresentations of what's in this ordinance and what isn't in this ordinance in some of the email and voicemail messages that have been received by the council. So if we determine that there is either an intentional or an accidental misrepresentation of the facts, we will be sure to correct that upon the end of each speaker's time. As was also brought up, if the intent of the council is to consider the modified version of this draft ordinance that would remove the inspection component altogether, we would not be able to act on that tonight. Just like we just went through in the previous item, we would potentially be introducing that item for a second action, and I would propose that if that's the direction we go, we would identify the date certain for a second reading of that item to be our June 6th regular meeting. We already have a very full agenda on May 2nd, and we may not be holding a meeting on May 16th. So that would give well over a month for everyone's consideration if, in fact, that's the direction we go, because we don't know what direction we're going yet. So with that, who would like to be first? I did see, not Carl, actually, you didn't put your hand up first, but Carl, you'll be second because I know you have another commitment. Please, the gal right behind you, please.
Mr. Mayor and council members, my name is Kim Wildman. I've been a Napa County resident for over 40 years and with my mom, a co-owner of a rental here in Yountville for the past 4 years. So I was a little alarmed. I'm glad to hear that the 1,000 is not what it appears on the surface. The inspection, I thought, well, wait. We work in conjunction with a property management person. We are very stringent in who we have. We try to get families to come in who are going to be an important part of the community and participate. We've never had a complaint from a neighbor. We do a yearly inspection. We respond immediately to any fix-its. So to me, it just felt overly punitive to do to conscientious landlords. Personally, I like the idea of landlord registration. I think it's a great idea. It's a good thing to know. Is that possible to put it on the property tax statement where you check a box that it's a rental property? I don't know. That seems like it would be a fast way to find out what you have going here. And I guess one of my other questions was answered too about currently and consistently enforcing already existing codes. So I think that kind of came up when you were talking about the education and the layers of things that can happen first. So that's probably all I have to say is that I'm perfectly happy to be registered, to pay $85 to have a business license. I think that's a reasonable request. The inspection, when I think that the majority of conscientious landlords already do things like that, I think the inspection requirement is overkill and not necessary in my opinion. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for setting the tone with a very brief and eloquent comment. Let's hold it to that high standard. Mr. Johnson, please.
3 minutes? You know me.
It started already, Carl. You better get going.
I wanted to address 2 items related to this. First is the character of the community that Councilman Dorbecker brought up. We are going through some discussions right now on how the character of our local community is changing as a result of, first off, part-time ownership or part-time residency, and secondly, rentals. Now, I am the president of a homeowners association with 24 units in the association. We have bylaws that require a 90-day rental. We have a great deal of difficulty, even with a small number of units, keeping track of what is being rented. Because a large number of rentals in an HOA is a kiss of death for the property values. And so we want to try and maintain property values for our residents. So I would say, number one, 90 days makes it a lot easier to keep the community spirit. Because most of the people who rent in our complex are people who are here because they work here, not because they're here for a month of fun. Secondly, I am totally in favor of some kind of a registration, and we would love to work with you, because the more we can do together to find out who is renting what, it's a big help for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe I saw a hand over on this side, and then I'll come back over here. I'm sorry if I'm not getting everybody exactly in order, but you all have a chance to share your thoughts. Yes, welcome.
I'm Daniel Sanchez with North Bay Association of Realtors. I want to ask that this item be continued to a later date. The vast majority of us who are concerned about this item only found out about this a few days ago. I'm sure you made all of your legal requirements of noticing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that many of interested stakeholders knew about it. To the substandard issue, if substandard is indeed what you're trying to get at, then there are better ways of going about getting that. You could of course red tag properties, you could notice properties, you could work with the property owners themselves. There's better ways of doing that than this. If substandard is indeed an issue, which having been around this community a bit, I haven't seen it that much, but if it is indeed the issue, then deal with that. This is not the principal way that you could deal with substandard conditions. Secondly, if an inspector comes out and sees a concern of ours is if an inspector comes out and sees unpermitted additions or modifications to a property, that's a big concern for a lot of homeowners. If an inspector goes to a unit and sees an unpermitted second unit that's just legal non-conforming or that just never was permitted, it's going to be a very big concern for homeowners to think that perhaps the city is going to now be going after those property owners for unpermitted additions, even where those unpermitted additions and modifications don't in any way threaten health and safety. Something can be unpermitted and still be fine with health and safety. That's a big concern of ours. Another concern, though, is that this ordinance is just not that well thought out. You haven't gotten much of any input from us in the industry who manage properties or who sell the properties. There's a lot of things that can be done to improve this ordinance. This ordinance does not exempt new construction, for instance. If you're truly interested in going after substandard housing, you should exempt new construction. New construction is not going to have anything substandard because it's new. Anything under 15 years should absolutely not have any inspection whatsoever. It'd be like changing the oil to a car with only 1,000 miles on it. It is literally pointless. Secondly, if you're interested in doing any kind of inspection, there should be a mechanism for self-certification, a self-inspection, a checklist that any property owner who has never had any issues, who has never had any kind of concerns with the city should be allowed to self-certify their unit with a checklist. A lot of communities do that. We're happy to provide resources. But the main thing is that we really hope that this issue gets continued to a later date where we could help to improve the ordinance. We're not inherently against a registration program. We're concerned about inspections, but we want to be part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for honoring the time as well. Yes, over here in the front.
My name is Larry Knapp. That name may not be unfamiliar to some of you. I know several of you have responded to my messages. My wife and I own 2171 Monroe Street and have for several years. And before I start, I'll devote some of my time to thanking all of you for the time that you put in doing the hard work that you do on behalf of Yountville, and particularly to at least 3 of you who responded to my emails over the holiday weekend, and I was impressed. I was working hard.
There were so many emails that you sent, it was kind of hard to keep up.
Well, I'm going to ask you to focus on the last large one I sent, because my wife put the detail in there, and if there's a stereotype of aloof husbands and detailed women, we're it. And she explained all of the logistical nightmares of someone like us dealing with the inspection issue. But I would like to start, first of all, by adding to Daniel's request that you simply continue this to allow input and feedback. I found out about this Saturday morning. I reached out to, I know dozens, and I believe may have reached hundreds is probably an exaggeration. I reached a lot of people, and nobody really knew that this was coming down. I know that you have probably legally complied with your notification. I'll use the term moral obligation versus legal. This will affect every property owner in Yountville. If we're a rental, it affects us, but we don't know who 1 or 2 years or 3 years down the road might be in a place where renting is in their favor. I don't have a problem with the registration process, although I think it probably needs to be discussed. I personally find the concept of the government coming into my house every 2 years, as I will use the term, draconian. I was raised in New England, and we're sort of proud of all of our rights, as everyone in this room is. It seems a little oppressive. And then if you would read my wife's portion of it's my signature, but she wrote it. And we are a VRBO rental. We have people leave one day, come in the next day. In some cases, we let the one stay a little longer or the other one come in a little earlier. They're all here for a month all the time. Sometimes we only have a matter of hours to do a deep clean, and that would mean that your inspector would have to fit into that schedule. If they were coming on weekends, I don't think you do that on weekends or holidays. I don't want to do it on weekends or holidays. I drove an hour to get here tonight. I'll drive an hour home, and every time you inspect my house, I'm going to have to make that 2-hour round trip. And so I think registration is not a bad idea. In August, I will celebrate my 48th year as a Realtor. I need to confess that. I am not a member of the North Bay Association of Realtors, but I know that someone earlier said Norbar was here to represent Realtors. Realtors represent the property rights of Americans. They debate things like mortgage interest deduction and various laws that affect everybody, not necessarily the Realtor profession.
And I'm sorry, your time has expired. If you have one last statement, one last sentence, that would be fine.
So I invite you to please include Norbar, who are experts in this sort of thing, in the discussions moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Knapp. Okay, I think somebody on this side was up next. Mr. Judy.
Don Judah again.
If you could lower that microphone a little bit just to make sure we can
hear. It was hard to hear back there. But, I assumed when I first received a little card about this meeting, that was the first I heard about the ordinance.
And no, that did not come from the town.
I know it did not come.
It was anonymous.
Anonymous.
And not entirely accurate.
Okay.
Okay.
In pursuing that, I called the town council and talked to a Mr. Steele, who explained to me that this did include all rentals, not just vacation rentals, is what I was assuming it was. He explained that it was to protect renters from substandard housing. By the way, mine is on 1885 Colombard, and it is well above standard housing, and we keep it that way. This Mr. Steele explained that he had a hard time finding people when he discovered the substandard houses, because the rental checks went to P.O. boxes and there was no way other than send a letter and not get a response. I think there's an easier way to identify these unsafe units without the sweeping ordinance that takes every single renter in this town under the same umbrella. An alternate process might be to notify renters to report substandard housing directly to you. An action could be something as simple as a red tagging, and I'll bet if the system is, if it's so substandard, the tenant should be removed. And when that rent check doesn't arrive at the landlord's house, I'll bet you anything he'll be down here to find out why, and then you can rectify the system, the whole situation based on the ordinance structure that you've created. We've rented properties in Yountville for over 30 years. And while I understand the concern about protecting renters from poor conditions, I do not see how an ordinance would impact the long-term properties, rental properties in Yountville being anything but a benefit, not a benefit to property owners, tenants, or even the town of Yountville. Our properties are managed by real estate professionals. They conduct routine inspections of the property. They notify us when there's an issue with something wrong in the unit, and we respond by fixing it. We have a homeowner association that notifies us of anything like poor roofing, exterior maintenance, or whatever, including parking or not bringing your garbage can in. We also have, in addition to that, insurance companies that every 2 years do an inspection, and they look at everything from smoke detectors to cracks in the sidewalk. I think we have enough people looking at our properties to assure our tenants are being kept safe.
And your time has expired, Mr. Judah. It goes fast, doesn't it?
It does.
Thank you.
If I could just do one
last, you're now taking up time from somebody else, but one last statement, if you can make it very quickly.
Okay, I guess the last statement would be, I think that you should look at where the violations are of the problems that you have seen, and you start with those people, and you apply some kind of ordinance like you've written to apply to them, and eliminate all of the other houses that have been renting and keeping up their properties. You throw a big net and you catch a lot of fish, but you're going to catch a lot of innocent and legal operating units in your net. It's not necessary. Thank you. Sorry, Randall.
That's okay. Yes, Joe. Second row. Yes. No? You're the first one here tonight, so I probably should have let you speak first.
That was a first, too, being the first anywhere. Guy Kyleman, and we own the property at 1878 Oak Circle, and it's been a rental for 17 years. We've had 3 renters, 3 tenants. They've all three have been excellent. And I would just like to go on the record that, first of all, I have no love for realtors or lawyers. And I would like to thank our vice mayor and Ms. Dorman for voting against this. I don't think it's necessary. There are already enough ordinances in this town and in this state that this is pretty superfluous. There are ordinances that take care of dilapidated properties, unsafe properties. Renters have rights. Those rights are posted on the internet. If they're not literate, I'm sure that someone would call their attention to it if the place was going to rack and ruin. I just don't, and this registration, I mean, why? It's unnecessary. And I think it's just another bureaucratic move that we don't need. This town has enough to keep track of without registering property owners that rent property. And I would like to see this continued, and maybe it'll die downstream someplace. It's just not necessary. As far as, tenant rights, we totally support it. We look after our tenants, and I think just about everybody in this room that has tenants, and by just showing up here, they have more than showed their concern not only for their property but for their tenants. And so I just think the whole ordinance should be washed out, done away with, let it die a slow death downstream. It's unnecessary. I I can't think of many more redundant words for this, but I really don't think it is necessary. And once again, on the safety of tenants, the laws are already there, both state and local. And we have the method of red tagging properties that are deemed unsafe. And this is a small community. We can't grow any further than what the boundaries are. And there are enough people in here that are community minded and look after one another that if something is unsafe, it will be called to the attention of the town. And our house is in a homeowners association, and while I can,
and your time is up. So again, last.
Anyway, let this go. Let it die a death downstream. We don't need it. Thank you.
Thank you. Third time's a charm. And I would ask that people respect the decorum of the council chambers for no cheering, no booing. Let everyone have a chance to speak their mind. Please. Yes, gentleman in the very back.
I'm going to get heck from the wife for getting up and speaking, but at age 81 and having lived in Yachtville, Ted Wooster, at 6645 Yacht Street and at 6645 Yacht B, because the town couldn't figure out how to give us another address even though there are two parcels there. I've had about 3 renters in the past 30 or 40 years. All have been good. The last renter is my brother-in-law. By having my brother-in-law there, that keeps my wife happy. And we have no need for this ordinance ourselves. I have no problem with the so-called registration. But as far as inspections and all that, we've had neighbors across the way, the Figuerolas, to mention a name, that had the biggest drug parties and fight, and the cops said probably your budget can be lessened in town because that piece of property has been sold, and the people they normally are fighting out there aren't there anymore. But that same piece of property sits there with nobody on it, and nobody's watching as to what's going on. It definitely needs to be red tagged. The mosquito problems are there, the water, sewer, etc. So yeah, I think there's a need to go after the people that already have a problem. And I do hate seeing gutters hanging off of houses, and there must be an ordinance that takes care of that. That's the other next door neighbor. But thank you.
Thank you. And good luck when you go home tonight.
Yeah, that's right. 0 is 0.
Yes, Ms. Khan.
Eve Khan. I have a question, and maybe the attorney could clarify this. At the beginning of this ordinance, you have a purpose. And you talk about requiring substandard residential units to meet and maintain building and housing code requirements. Whereas a housing code requirement for some of you beautiful Victorians is not a housing code requirement for something built in the 90s or 2000s. So what is the intention? Are you, or when you started thinking about this, were you looking to, and I know inspections are potentially off the table here, but if you're looking at an older home, are you looking for sprinklers? Are you looking for wiring, things that would not normally take place? And as realtors, those are not required when they sell. In fact, sometimes people like having some of those old pieces. So I just kind of throw that in because there's a lot of people who talked about overreach, but this is something that can have a very different impact because you have a lot of older homes. So I ask that if you can clarify that, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. I'll ask town attorney to address that, please.
Sure. The housing code is a uniform code that's adopted by reference by the town, and I believe slightly modified based on conditions that are present here. It presents a set of habitability standards in general and provides a basis for enforcing those habitability standards, as well as the health and safety code. So further down after the purpose and the definitions of applicable codes as currently written, it incorporates health and safety type codes, including the housing code, the state housing law, which is a health and safety code, which talks about habitability, things like running water, heating, these types of things that are in the building. and then also Title 24 and 25 of the Code of Regulations. So I don't know if that answers the question, but.
Hope so. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, let's go to this side of the room. You seem to have skewed a little bit that way. I'm guessing that's where the bus let off everyone.
And thank you to all of you. My name is Joanne Bingham. I've lived here for more than 20 years as a renter, and in the 70s as a visitor, and there was only, I think, one hotel at the time, and I've been a property owner. The last comment was very interesting. I do think that anyone who would be renting here, short-term or otherwise, deserves to have all those safety codes that was just mentioned. Sprinklers, the fire alarms, everything. That should be a given. I'm curious as to if you really have any true idea how many rentals are here in our lovely town. What is the percentage? I mean, we've all heard it bandied about over the last few years. How many people are we talking about that rent? Craigslist or otherwise. The gentleman here, he's been a very apparently good landlord. But how do we enforce it and how do we know? I would like to commend this ordinance that we're talking about. Probably doesn't go far enough. 90 days, I don't think that goes far enough either. But nonetheless, it does bear some scrutiny. I know it's a very tough decision, and I think someone who's been a property owner here and lives here now, I might be in the minority is what I'm hearing, but please don't let that dissuade you. The people who love Yountville and have been here for many, many years, we're not renters, but we chose to live here many years ago, and we have a lot vested here. So please take this very seriously, and I appreciate all your good work. Thank you.
Thank you. I promised to go back to this side, actually second to last row, I think. Whose hand was that? Okay. Couldn't see a person, I just saw a hand.
Good evening.
Hello.
My name is Terry Wunderlich, and I'm a realtor in the Napa Valley, and I've lived in Napa since 1975. As a realtor and representing your constituents throughout your town and in the valley, we take these kinds of ordinances very seriously. We would really impress upon you that in order to really get full understanding of how the ordinance may impact your community, to get more input from the realtors. And partly because that is our role. We've worked with cities throughout the county of Napa and in Sonoma County, because that is our base, but throughout the state as well. I'm also the representative for Congressman Mike Thompson for the realtors, once again, because we represent his constituents just like yours. So we would impress upon you that this is a serious ordinance to really get a broad spectrum of what the impact is. If in true there is a lot of issues that are concerning your town, is it really substantial housing? Is it the short-term rentals? What is the real issue? And really to try to vet that out so that you really have a great understanding of how this is going to impact your community beyond just the few folks you've talked to. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw another hand over here somewhere. Yes, second row. Yes. Tom was blocking you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Wunderlich. I am a local realtor. I also am the chairman of the Napa chapter of North Bay Association of Realtors. I also am a part of the local government relations committee. Obviously, we do not get paid for all of our volunteer work, but we do try and be involved and have an understanding of what's happening in our communities. I am born and raised in the Napa Valley and have worked in real estate for over 9 years. I do have some concerns, but my main concern is if we're talking about health and safety, there are incredible tenant rights within our state. If we're talking about code enforcement, I think that's a fairly easy fix when we're dealing with these types of issues, to have them addressed. As someone did bring up earlier, that if there is a problem, possibly there could be a public venue to where a renter could come to the town and speak upon their issues, even though there are plenty of public advocacy programs that can help with any tenant rights. So again, I see this more of a code enforcement issue. Again, if there is any way we can help the council in any verbiage or any movement forward, we'd be more than happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Let's go right up here front, and then Ms. Reeves.
Yeah, once again, John Murphy, 6484 Heather Street. Been listening to the input from the civilians and the staff and everything. It seems to me that maybe the original impetus, or impeti, if you will, for the direction to staff way back in December, or the state ordinance, the concerns of the neighborhoods in the town, the residences, are the very short-term rentals, the weekend rentals, the VRBO, the Airbnb, the Craigslist people. And from what I've heard from both sides of this room tonight, there doesn't seem to be anything in these ordinances that address the would-be scofflaws that do that kind of thing in the town, and maybe detract a little bit from our neighborhoods. And if they are going to be scofflaws and they understand what this ordinance is about, they're not going to register. So just a rhetorical question for you guys to consider is, what do we do about those situations? It doesn't seem to be addressed by either of these ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see our town manager leaning forward. I think he has a response.
Well, I think there's a couple things I've heard from several that I want to try and give the council and the community some feedback on. One, the question was asked, how many rental properties do we have in the town? The answer is, we don't know, because there's no process and mechanism to know who is renting the property out. Again, I mentioned the fact that the registration element would be very akin to the home occupation business permit. So we really don't know which properties are being rented, which properties are being rented legally, which properties are being rented illegally. So that's the first thing. I also heard a speaker mention 90 days. The 90 days is not applicable in this ordinance. That was the second unit language, and this particular ordinance stays at 30-day as the rental minimum. So I just wanted to clarify those two things.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Reeves?
Pam Reeves, 6887 Jefferson Street. I've been a resident for 38 years. I really would like to support the suggestion from staff that the modification removal of the inspection element of this ordinance be really considered and adopted. I really, if there is an inspection issue or a substandard issue, I would really like the town to take the tack of education and to really step up its interaction with landlords and tenants and provide some kind of literature or some kind of forum for those educational programs to be available to both. And I feel like this ordinance contained two things that were a little bit overwhelming, and if you remove the health and safety portion, the inspection portion, then we come to the rental portion. And it feels like the town has been grappling with vacation rentals. And if you want to find out and regulate vacation rentals, I think you should address the ordinance directly to that, and to really have this idea of a license or a number or something for people who rent their houses out at a 30-day minimum stay, and treat them as a business, because that's an intensive vacation use. So I think it's perfectly acceptable for the town to require that those people register and perhaps even pay tax based on the rental of the stay. So I think we should really look at the problem directly on, and not drag in all of the other kinds of rentals, which single-family residents, which are for over 30 days. Those have been historically what is the base of our rental programs, and to add some kind of regulation on something that's not broken, I don't think that's really helpful. We kind of have the feeling that the vacation rental portion is broken, so let's address that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, black t-shirt.
Mike Bertolucci, Realtor at Gates Estates, homeowner and resident. I'm hearing a lot of our clients, and friends, and locals kind of talking about the condition of the property. Properties being in poor condition, red tagged. I know the property you guys are talking about that was red tagged. And I'm hoping that that's not the property that has spurred this forward, because it's not comparable. It's not comparable to any of these homes, any of the rentals, any of the properties we represent or we sell. One thing that we do as real estate agents is disclosure, disclosure, disclosure. And I think it needs to be disclosed to the property owners, the people with the rentals, what property maybe that you're referring to. Maybe that it was a multi-unit that was in very poor condition that, yes, should have been red tagged and probably should be either demolished or rebuilt or have something done with it. But it does not compare to any of these properties. I've seen most of the properties or sold these people most of the properties that they're referring to. So I think that that should definitely be something that's addressed as well.
Thank you. And just to clarify, in the previous, to this point, the previous conversation went in great detail about the fact that people do think, some people anyway, do think that this is in response to the one issue on Madison Street. It's not based on one issue. We have been hearing for months, if not years, about problems on many different properties, not just short-term vacation rentals, but long-term properties where the renters are put in a difficult circumstance because, you know, we didn't expect the bad landlord to show up tonight. We expected all the good landlords to show up tonight, and that's what we've seen. But there are some out there, and we have heard about them. So I think you'll hear a little bit more about that as we deliberate this further. But just to clarify that one point, that it is not in response to any single individual condition. So, other members of the public? Yes, Lloyd.
Hi, Lloyd Penrod, 2910 Lincoln. Just a few items from the last meeting that I thought over. Hemet was mentioned as a town that implemented a program. My father lived in Hemet. It's lower income town, Southern California, really hit hard during the housing crash. Many more issues with crime and neglected properties. Not an issue here. Apples to oranges comparison. I emailed you some info on San Luis Obispo, who went through this whole process. A bit of a tourist area, nice location, more apples to apples comparison. They implemented a rental program partly to deal with substandard student housing, which again is not an issue here. Major backlash. Landlords Association and a group of homeowners filed a lawsuit against the city. 2 new council members were elected who campaigned on changing the program. In under 2 years since the ordinance went into effect, the new council suspended inspections and is moving to repeal the ordinance. As for tenant rights and safety, California is one of the most tenant-friendly states with plenty of protection measures in place. As mentioned by staff in the last meeting, if there is a serious problem with a rental property, it can be resolved with existing code enforcement rules. And perhaps a tenant awareness program would be more appropriate. As far as vacation rentals go, complaints from neighbors will be the reason given for the need to crack down. And there are rules in place to deal with this, with the noise ordinance, the 30-day minimum rental rule, and repeat offenders who have noisy guests or rent for less than 30 days can be dealt with as a public nuisance. As a side note, guests who stay at vacation rentals have more money to spend on restaurants, wine tasting, shopping. It can be a plus on that side of it. Every homeowner will be affected by this. Even if you don't intend to rent your house now, plans change. There may be a sick relative out of state or some other reason for a lengthy absence. Your kids may inherit your property and they will have to deal with this. It's just invasive policy. We received notice of, as far as noticing people, we received notices from the town for very localized items going into town, going on in town, and even the townwide cleanup day. There simply has not been enough notice and time given for input on an item that affects every homeowner in town. At the very least, give more time so that people who will be affected by this have time to see it and weigh in. Time's up.
Well timed.
Almost finished.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gates, yes, please.
Cindy Gates, Gates Estates.
Could you just lower that mic? We always have the tall people come before the less tall people.
Sorry, Cindy Gates, Gates Estates. I own the real estate company here in town. I've been doing real estate since 1979. And I also have a real estate rental department in my office, which I've done for 20 years. We've always done mostly long-term rentals and nothing less than 30 days. I see what you're trying to do, and I agree with some of it. But when I see the inspection periods, and I see the fees, and I see all the regulations where everybody has to register their rentals, there are so many clients and people that own homes here that we property manage that are from other countries, other states, and we keep them in tip-top condition. I have a whole team of people that work for me. They paint, they're handymen, they're plumbers, they're electricians, they're you name it. I have it. Contractors. So we do keep everything fine. But the thing that I'm concerned about, and I've waited to the end here because I really wanted to see and hear what everybody thought, but what my primary concern is, what I've worked so hard for Yountville is I've gotten our property values back up. I think I've worked really hard on that since the crash and before. And I think if we complicate this process, it's going to really bring our property values down. Who's going to want to buy into our little town when they have to deal with something this complicated? As inspections every 2 years, when, as Larry put, they're not here. We're here to do those types of things, but he's right. Sometimes we have tenants in, and I've got 5 hours to get that place cleaned. It has to go through my approval or Tom's approval, who runs the property management department, before we let someone in. So the standards are beyond very high. So when you do this other process and you drag out all these procedures and all these guidelines, which are vetted in other ways already, tenants have their rights, things beyond rental condition have to be fixed. So I don't see that. But going back to the whole process, if you come through this with this whole process like you've laid out for us, you're going to bring down the property values we've worked so hard to keep up. Okay, it'll be more, well, I don't want to say other, it'll be more like other vacation destinations with lower valued rentals that would need something like this, not us here. I really don't see that. And we have a handful of places that maybe are in tough condition, like the one you talked about on Madison Street, but largely our properties are in very good condition. So I would...
Time's run out.
Okay.
Last thought.
Okay, last thing. I would say take out the part about the inspections. Think carefully and take this in a slower manner. Please notify everybody about what you're doing. Make an effort to notify everybody, and let's get everybody in Yountville, their locals, all of their opinions and how they feel about this. Not just drop this bomb on everybody and they have no say in it. Where they paid for their properties, I think they should have a right to put their opinion in. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Yes. Since she brought you up.
Tom Gleason. I work at Gates Estates, Sotheby's International Realty. Been in the Valley since 1969. Been in Yountville for 15 years. I have the privilege and pleasure of being the property manager for a lot of people here in town. And these are the most proud owners of their properties. And there's a pride of ownership with these folks that I feel very blessed to be managing them because they make my job very easy. Because of our kind of business philosophy at Gates Estates, we vet our tenants, and we have fabulous tenants, and we have fabulous landlords, fabulous owners, and it's a great symbiotic relationship. So I don't feel that the inspections and that kind of thing, they do it because they care. And these are fabulous people who really care about Yountville and have made it what it is today. And I think it's a pretty special place and only getting better. And that's my input. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? Yes.
Hello. My name's Mary Kyleman. We own a house in Yountville on Oak Circle. And I feel that this is very overreaching on the part of government into people's personal lives that I find very disconcerting. I feel that Yountville is a beautiful place because, as has been said, we care about our properties. We just spent $100,000 on our house taking care of rotten stuff that we didn't even know was there. And people care for their properties around here. There are always a couple bad apples in the basket, but that's pretty obvious. Those stand out, and you have the tools to deal with those in your authority. The rest of us shouldn't be punished with all this legislation and fees and overreach when we're all doing a good job. Our tenants have been there for, I don't know, 15 years now, and we don't even make enough to come out even because we haven't raised the rent on them. We've actually lowered it because they've had hard times. So I feel we should not be punished for the few bad apples, and I feel the overreach is a real stain on the beauty of Yountville. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. I think I saw, yes.
Yeah, I'm Ernie Cabral. My wife and I live at 6721 Mesa Court in Yountville.
Oh, sorry, just 1 second. I want to make sure we can hear you. Mr. Beeson.
Just when I get up.
Okay, go ahead.
Anyway, we've lived in Yountville for 35 years. Like I said, we live at 6721 Mesa Court. Before that, first 5 years here, we lived at 1884 Mulberry Street. We kept that house. I sent in an email today that explains all this, but I don't know who saw it because I just heard about this yesterday. So sent in the email. I know and nobody's had a chance to respond. But so the house that we had before is we raised our daughter. Did all the went to school here and everything else, and so the house. We have renters that have been here. Each of our renters have been in for at least 5 years at a time in the house. The house has been. We treat the house like it's our own, and we've done extensive repairs inside and out, upgrades. Just put in a landscaping in the front yard and irrigation and all because I needed it this year. And anyway, the point is the questions I have are I haven't heard. Maybe because I'm just new to this, but I haven't heard what the purpose would be of our registering our house. That isn't 100% clear to me, and it's and I mean I don't think that anybody's going to find anything if they come and do the inspections, but I'm not sure why we would be wrapped up in that process. I'm not sure why we have to register. I'm not sure why we get wrapped up in the process. It doesn't sound overly onerous to be registered, but it would be good to hear why we are registered and what purpose that has. And then I haven't really heard a clear explanation of why we started the process to begin with. I've heard people talk about code enforcement and all that, but the fact that most people are not in that category, I'm not sure how this ordinance would help.
Okay. Thank you. And I'll ask the town manager to address a couple of those questions.
I think, again, the provisions in the intent of the ordinance are to address a number of things. And some of them relate to the use of the rental, whether that's a short-term vacation, illegal rental, longer term, managing it. Some of it is code enforcement, some of it is property management. So I don't want to say that when staff looked at this, that there isn't one overarching, compelling issue, but the thing that comes back is we don't know which properties are rented. So therefore, it is hard. I've heard people suggest we could send out awareness to tenants. We really can't because we don't know which properties are rented. So it comes back to, if we have a registration, we're able to understand, and again, I'm going to make it very similar to those that have a home business occupation. I think the element there is then we can be better positioned to go after, we can support elimination of the inspection program, because then I think we can better tune to knowing if that's a rental property, who's responsible. And then we can deal with the code enforcement issues, and then we also can deal with the illegal vacation rental in a more succinct and clear way. So I do think that that's the intent of that, because right now we don't know which properties are rented. We don't know what percentage of the community is rented. You've heard tonight the conversation. There are people that rent long-term, and there are people that rent short-term. And there's community conversation about that. So that's what's leading to this and a number of things. And I think from, again, what you're hearing also is we have been able to look at and address some of those. And if the compelling issue is simply being able to have a program to know which people are in the business, because renting your property is a business, who's in that business? And if we can do that, then I think we're better positioned to do some of the things that you've all individually talked about, which is go after those properties that have an issue and are a problem. And I think, you know, that would be a tool to help us address that.
Steve, could you speak specifically to the $85 fee, the fact that that's cost recovery for staff time, and exactly what monetary impacts might occur if there is a registration component?
That is exactly it. We would, the fee is to address the registration format. We're hoping to have an interactive online form, monitors it, and we set up a database to monitor. And then when there's a resident or a constituent, we may be able to say, no, this is a legitimate, because we can contact the owner, and if the neighbors are complaining, we have the ability to say, we've reviewed, we've communicated, we understand what's going on. No, it's not an issue. These folks are in compliance. Or it gives us an approach to know, hey, we need to do something with those, because there are rentals, both short-term and long-term, that occasionally the tenants cause disruption to their neighbors. That happens, and this is a small town, and we occasionally get those, and we're trying to be responsive to it.
And can you just explain, because there seems to be some question about how onerous any type of monetary impact would be if the inspection component is removed. That would remove some $300 and
correct
some dollars every 2 years.
If I could, I'll repeat. The $85 is the annual registration permit. The $330 would have been good for a 2-year inspection. So if you eliminate, if the council eliminates the inspection component, you eliminate the $330 cost, and it is simply the $85 annual registration. Again, not much different than the home business occupation permit.
And the only other monetary impact would be if somebody was in repeated violation and we had to get to the point of instituting fines at anywhere from $100 to $1,000.
To be honest, that is not different than what we have done on about half a dozen properties where we have issued various levels of code enforcement all the way up to red tagging properties.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that was help with some clarification. Anyone else? Last chance. Okay, seeing no one else, we'll return. Last chance. Okay. For council discussion, consideration, potential action. Let's. Why did you have to wait until after I said no? You've been here before.
I know. Well, I wasn't sure. My name's Debbie. Thank you. It just kind of struck me. If there's people causing problems, then you've always told us if we're disturbed by whether there's people in the park late at night, call the sheriff. Well, if there's problems going on, I mean, I'm sure renters have rights. I mean, they have more rights than landlords a lot of times, but I'm sure you'll hear about it through the renters. And you can tell, people that are landlords have their, the neighbors call the sheriffs. That's what you tell us as residents. If you have a disturbance, there's a disturbance in the park or anywhere, just call the sheriff. So I'm just kind of like saying maybe use that. It just kind of struck me funny that that's your answer to us if there's an annoyance to call the sheriff. So maybe instead of causing all these, inspections and registration, if renters are causing problems, just tell them to call the sheriff and have the sheriff come out, and you can deal with it with the sheriff. And anyway,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're finished with our public comment portion of this. Invite council. I'm going to start to my far right. Councilmember Mueller, your thoughts?
My thoughts. First, I'd just like to thank everybody who has come out tonight, sent emails, made phone calls, got in contact with us. I wish we had when we're trying to outreach on other issues, I wish we knew the secret here. If there's who's the ground zero person that calls one person who calls two more people, because there's a lot of outreach we would like to extend, and I think we've really have done a good job, and I know we have our legal notices, but I think they have been timely, so I'd just like to comment regarding that. And since time is late and everybody wants to hear what we're going to say, I'll be generally brief. I have heard overwhelming, if not, at least very supportive from everybody about the registration program. That makes a lot of sense. We know where our businesses are. We know who has in-home businesses. Knowing where the rental properties are, I think that makes sense, and there is certainly much support for that. And I think, as the town manager suggested, not having the inspection portion also makes sense. So I am in support of that. The other thing I heard several times that I might suggest that we add is the a tenant education program, and that might be just once we know where the rentals are, maybe on an annual, semi-annual, or every other year basis, we could send out, the tenants' rights list. Not everybody goes on the internet. Not everybody really feels comfortable, dealing with the landlord because, not a lot of rentals around and they don't want to get thrown out. So that might be something that we could consider as well. So that's my position.
Councilmember Dorman.
Again, thank you all for coming out tonight and for all of your emails and phone calls. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you. So I have heard a number of people support, or at least are neutral, about the registration issue. I have always had issues with the inspection portion, so I have no problem letting go of that. I do have a question, though, because as far as what the registration will do, a piece of the proposed ordinance we have not talked about is that once a permit number is issued, that permit number must go in all ads. And so that gives us a way to track businesses that are complying and not complying. So I think it's not that we're trying to cast too broad a net. I think we're trying to put something in that is the least intrusive to give us a way to still track better track who's in compliance and who's not. So I think that I would generally be in favor. I do have some issues with the fine portion that I discussed with the town attorney. I'm not sure we need the second part with the mandatory shall, because I think this is something that needs to be handled through education first. I agree with Councilmember Moeller that I don't know that it would go in the ordinance, but I think we should do something as a town to do some education to tenants and landlords. As for putting it off, I think if we can make some progress tonight and come back with a second draft that would be back on second reading and leave enough time in between for everyone who's interested to see the new draft, then you can always call us or write us and have discussions about that. So I think that might serve a dual purpose, to give a new draft for discussion purposes that maybe takes out inspection and maybe does some things that would be more satisfactory.
Thank you. Councilmember Durham.
So I'll thank everybody as well, but obviously you didn't get the nasty emails I got, so that's fine. But I still thank everyone. But I have heard and read every email. I apologize for not replying to them all, but I read them all, and I will, if I ever choose, I will be the best landlord there ever is. I can promise you that. So I want to clarify my yes vote from 2 weeks ago, because I was talking to a landlord in Yountville who was questioning and concerned about my yes vote. And there were only 3 of you in the audience that week, so I don't think you all know about this. And let me give you a quick background. I was born and raised in Napa. My father was in construction and built over 70 homes in Napa. He was also a fireman for 38 years. He also ended his career here in Yountville for 5 years, working in Vista, Crossroads, and Hopper Creek as a maintenance man. And I've been a real estate broker for over 16 years, so I understand everyone's position. So all the good people showed up, all the great situations have been discussed, but recently what's interesting is I have a neighbor who's walked by my home for the last 13 years, who's been a tenant here for 22 years, who works 2 jobs in Yountville with 3 other family members, and she was served an eviction notice. She does English as her second language, so there was a lot of confusion, and she was out within 30 days, and there was a lot of questions as to whether her eviction was legal or not. Unfortunately, this was all of the follow-up, all of the information that was given to her, and all the support came to her after the fact, which was a little bit too much, too late. So there are situations like that happening in Yountville. So I'm a firm believer that this ordinance will assist renters. One of the letters we received said this is an underhanded way to regulate short-term vacation rentals. It's not underhanded. It's one of the ways we're trying to regulate short-term rentals, which are illegal in Yountville. So I want to be absolutely clear on that. So that's why I support this ordinance. As real estate agents, someone brought up disclosures and due diligence, and sometimes that does not always happen in Yountville, because I know of one specific home that was turned in less than 12 months because the buyers didn't know they couldn't put it on VRBO, Airbnb for short term, which it was on every site, and then they sold it because they wanted an income producing property. So something slipped through the cracks. Also, I spoke to 3 landlords in this community. Apparently inspections aren't happening everywhere. They're happening with all of you, but they're not happening at all the properties. So it's an inconsistent thing that's not happening, and that is why I voted yes on this 2 weeks ago, and why I still support my vote.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Well, good evening, and I too want to thank you for coming. It's really good to see the engagement. I've struggled with this, as you know. I voted against it, and I did feel that it was overreach. I thought the inspection process and the fines were overreach. But I am a business person. I wear another hat other than this. I have a public relations business, and every year I buy my business license from the town. and I have it in my office, and I don't see, and hearing some of you support the idea of having a registration, registering as a business, essentially, because town manager is right. If you own a property and you rent it, that's a business. And to be perfectly honest, we are very, very concerned about the quality of the town with the VRBOs and the Airbnbs, and we know what's going on, but there's no way that we can really track it because we don't know how many people have houses that they rent, and so we can't even check that. So I'm feeling this evening persuaded that the registration would be acceptable to me, but not any of the other onerous interference and inspections and the fees associated with those. We do have code enforcement, and I think that those could handle anything. But as town manager said, it would make it easier to reach the property owner to address some of those code issues if we needed to do that, if we knew who the owners of the properties were that are rented. So I'm leaning towards approving this when we see the red-lined document that removes all reference to inspections. I'm leaning toward supporting that. But I'm assuming that we will not be taking action on this item tonight because I think there's going to be changes.
Thank you. There is the possibility of action, just wouldn't be final action. If there is a general acceptance and action to move forward with a modified version of what was presented tonight. I will thank most people for their comments. This is really an example of how the process does work. Our staff has worked extensively for many months on the language, on research. You heard tonight additional information that has been learned by other Napa County jurisdictions and what they've been doing. It's often how we educate ourselves and make our laws better. But the other thing that's challenging about ordinances is they're often crafted for the worst behaviors, not for the best behaviors. And you're all in here seeing that firsthand. I have no doubt that all of you who are professing long-term great renters and tenants that have respected your properties and you've done right by them, I don't question any of those anecdotes. However, I know of a homeowner that's in my immediate neighborhood that has basically chased out 3 different sets of families that were renting this particular property because she refused to respect the laws as a landlord. Is most recently an elderly couple that was chased out because of unsafe living conditions because she wouldn't fix a mold problem in the kitchen and said, well then, sue me. And so that's what this type of an ordinance is meant to address. It's not the most obvious, which was the headline-making property on Madison Street. But we have had, as you've just heard, other anecdotal information, other circumstances where, yes, there are laws in the books that are meant to protect renters. Not all renters understand that. Not all landlords know what they're obligated to do for their renters. Again, you've educated yourselves, you're realtors that comply with the laws, but we are having to address the fact that there are some property owners in Yountville that do not. So I don't see the need for the inspections language. I've heard enough evidence that is not necessary. It's something that if down the road, as we start to learn more and more about our rental properties, we feel like there are other problems that are coming up, maybe that's something to revisit, but I don't think it's necessary at this time. I certainly don't think an $85 annual fee is onerous. I know in my neighborhood in Washington Park, we have small cottages renting for $3,000 a month. $85 a year is not going to be an impact on the property values or an impact on you as a landlord. And there are other properties in this town that are even rented for even higher dollar amounts. So I don't see the fee as having any true negative impact. And as the town manager has pointed out repeatedly, many of the options that you've offered us up tonight about, well, just inform the tenants what they can do and make sure you reach out to the tenants and do this. Until we understand what properties have tenants in them, we're really at a loss for what we can really do and what we can find out. So I will continue to support the revised, modified ordinance that we have been presented with by our town attorney that has eliminated the inspections. I feel like registration is fair and appropriate, and so I'll support that going forward. So with that, if there is a motion to be offered, I would welcome that.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
We do have the revised ordinance here if the council would like to take a look at it, and also copies for the public as well. That removes the inspection requirement.
Okay, if you could maybe just verbally identify what sections or section would be eliminated. Yes.
It eliminates section 8.08.030, subsection A5 and subsection A6 relating to inspection scheduling and rental inspection fees. It eliminates the entire section 8.08.040 titled Required Inspections for a Residential Rental Unit. And it also removes in section 8.08.050 subsection A in the third line, starting with the word has failed and ending with required herein on the fourth line relating to inspections.
And as a reminder, if this is the motion that is presented and ultimately approved, this would just be the first reading of this ordinance. It would not take effect yet. Similar to the previous item, this would come back, and as I stated, I'm going to request, if we do move forward, that date certain would be June 6th, so that everyone that's interested would have time to thoroughly analyze the language as it's potentially being modified. So with that, if town
I was just
manager.
going to say also, Mayor, Council, if folks are interested in getting directly from the town the revised version and the information as we're putting it together, if you would give Nathan your email and contact number, we'll make sure you all directly get very quickly the version that the town attorney is talking about.
We have many of their emails already.
We just
But
don't
not
know
all
their
of them.
faces, yeah.
Yes, all of yours, yes.
Yeah.
There will be a very professionally made sign-up sheet on here if you would like to be notified, and we'll also put some pens just right by the door as you leave. Not saying that you have to do it on your way out, but that's just where it'll be located.
So before we get any further, I want to find out if we do have action that's going to be presented by.
I hit my button.
Okay. Could you verbalize your motion, Councilmember Moeller?
Would the town clerk like me to do something else? Is that what you're looking for? Me to verbalize
Please
my...
verbalize the motion.
Okay, I will verbalize my motion.
Thank you so much.
I would like to make a motion that we approve ordinance number 17-460.
Introduce and waive the reading of, as opposed to approving the ordinance.
That's correct.
Right. Well, I was going to do the modifications and then waive the reading of the entire thing.
I was just correcting because you said approve the ordinance, and so we're not approving the ordinance.
We're making a motion to...
Introduce.
Okay, I'll do it first instead of last.
The town
Okay.
attorney is nodding that we should make that distinction.
All right, so make a motion that we introduce and waive the reading of ordinance number 17-460, an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Yountville, adding Chapter 8.08 to Title 8 of the Code, Yountville Municipal. That's out of order, but I'll read it as it is. The Code Yountville Municipal, even though it should be Municipal Code of Yountville, regarding the rental registration and inspection program, with the following changes: that we remove the inspection program from the title. We also remove section A5 and A6 from section 8.08.030. We remove the entire section 8.08.040, and we remove in section 8.08.050, starting with the third line in paragraph A. Did I get that
Yes,
right?
that's correct.
And with those, again, waive the reading.
Does that cover everything, Gary?
Yeah, just to clarify, in subsection A of 8.08.050, it begins on the third line starting with the word has, and then goes to the fourth line ending with herein, and that's the portion to be removed.
Correct.
So that motion as presented, is there a second? I will second that motion. Any further discussion? We do have a motion and a second on the floor.
I do,
Councilmember-
yes, just one question in what's being removed on section 8.08.050. So under A, the revocation,
Yes.
under the proposed red line, if a residential rental unit has been cited by a building inspector for a violation of applicable codes, are we saying that the rental permit may be revoked?
Yes, that's correct.
So that's getting back kind of into the inspection arena, that if there's been a code violation, I just want to be clear, if there's been a code violation, the rental permit can be revoked.
That's correct. If there is a violation of the municipal code or the other health and safety codes, yes, the permit could still be revoked under the language that a motion has just been made for.
Thank you.
So if you break the law, you can lose your permit to rent your property.
Yep, and that the violation doesn't necessarily come to the attention of the town through an inspection, just to be clear on that.
But it's not immediate and imminent on the first violation.
No.
It goes back to our municipal code and those conditions.
So,
Just
yes,
yeah.
we do have a motion and a second on the floor, so I'd ask that we vote on that motion. Please cast your ballots.
Councilmember Dornbecker?
I voiced you.
heard?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Michelle, you heard Councilmember Durham?
I did.
Okay.
Escaldetti.
So this does not pass on a 3-2 vote. So we do not move forward with that revised ordinance. Is there any other motion to be had on this item? Would somebody be interested in modifying the language? Or is this something that is not going to move forward? I offer anyone that voted against it if they have an opinion about, is there something that they would want to see changed, or they stand firm with their votes? Councilmember Durham?
I stand firm in the vote that I made 2 weeks ago. I would be willing to make some level of modification in the inspection period, but I still think there needs to be some aspect of an inspection to it. We saw other examples of other communities, and so I'd be willing to discuss those.
Councilmember Dorman?
So my sticking points with the proposed red line are the if it's truly a registration ordinance, then I don't feel it appropriate to have the sanction of revoking the registration. I also think if it's truly a registration ordinance, at the purpose, .010, we should take the language out to ensure the interior and exterior comply with applicable codes and to require substandard residential rental units to meet housing requirements, if it's truly a registration ordinance. I don't know why we would still need .030A2, the rental certification statement. I certainly can see the piece of that says the landlord shall sign the rental registration form, but I don't know what we would be certifying. And as I said before, I do have some issues of why we have the second, the administrative penalty in there. So those are my sticking points with it, as described.
Any comments you wanted to make?
Well, as I thought about this, I think that this is also something that as a town and a general plan, we should have more input from the community, not less. And I think that, you know, having everyone have the opportunity to absolutely look at this, and even as much as I really do think that it would help to have a registration of the people who own property and rent it out, I feel that we have to include more conversation with our residents to achieve what we really want to achieve with this. So I would.
Thank you. Is there a substitute motion or a new motion to be considered?
I have a question. When the community park issue came up, there was I don't want to wait too long on this because I think there is a need for the ordinance. So I'm trying to think of a way. Is there a way to designate one or two council members and staff to have a meeting, get ideas, and come back with a proposed motion? Whether we can reach consensus, I don't know. But to let everybody have a dedicated meeting, can we do that in the next couple or 3 weeks and bring it back? Because I do see the need for a registration ordinance.
Well, what I'm going to propose is I'm not hearing any other motion being presented, so I'm going to just formally say that this ordinance has now failed by a 3-2 vote. If staff wants to revisit, given council's feedback, and there is something else that the staff wants to bring forward, whether it's with additional public participation or not.
I think the real question is, what is the interest of the council? Because we've tried to put a draft, we've tried to make some modifications. I think in order to have a helpful dialogue, we would need to know what in all candor are your interest and intent in trying to achieve.
Well, I think, Steve, I'll just speak to that. I think you just heard from Councilmember Dorman that she would be open to modifications. So I think Councilmember Dorman and staff should get together and talk about those elements that you have concerns over.
Or I'll give it a shot. I'll make a motion and see if I get a second. So I make a motion that we adopt, introduce and waive the first reading of ordinance number 17460 with the changes set out by the town attorney and the following additional changes. In .010, delete everything from to ensure through code requirements. .080 subsection B, strike that in its entirety.
Wait, zero what? What were the last three digits?
0.080B, strike that in its entirety.
Sorry, I'm not following you on that one either.
No, I'm not either.
8.08.
Sorry, I'm just referencing the last three after the last decimal point. They're all 8.08, so I'm just going to the .080 last three digits.
So .080.
Strike
enforcement
B in its entirety. Then going back up to .030, strike out A2, except for the part that says landlord shall sign it. And also I think those are the only changes I would make into those, other than those suggested by the town attorney.
So I have a question. What was the very last one, and where was the signature part?
It was under
.030.
.030A2. Strike out everything about rental certification except just say the landlord has to sign it.
So he has to just sign the rental form. Okay, I have one more question. So if a landlord does not register, there are no financial consequences. Is that your intent?
No, my intent is that A would capture the financial consequences. Is my understanding that that also allows for a discretionary administrative fine, that Chapter 8.05. If I'm incorrect in that.
Then I'd like, hear the town attorney opinion on that.
If I could get some clarity on the question, is the question whether or not someone who fails to get a permit by January 1, 2018 could be fined for not doing so?
Is that your question?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
The answer to that is yes.
Okay.
And then one other thing, under .050A, revocation, in addition to what the town attorney wants to take out, I would like to take out, or if the residential unit has been cited by a building inspector for a violation of applicable codes.
That's the fourth and fifth line down.
Right.
And the intent there is?
I think if it's a registration ordinance, let's do a registration ordinance. And in the future, if we want to come back to some sort of code enforcement or some sort of habitability, I'm all for that. But
Okay.
let's just do a registration ordinance.
Okay, I'll second that motion.
I would also just add one more thing for clarity for the discussion. The proposed removal of in 8.08.030A2, that first sentence shall contain a certification to comply with the provisions of this chapter. That would still apply to the advertising provisions that are required when you include the permit number for advertising. So there would still be something to certify to. We could still remove the requirement, but as that was part of the discussion, I wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you for that. So you're saying the certification, there would be a section on the application that says I
understand.
certify that I will comply, that I will.
I understand.
Okay. I mean, I don't think that's necessary, but if it's okay to leave it in.
Okay, I'm
Well,
fine
it's
with
your
it.
motion, and then
Yeah.
the seconder would have
That's
to
okay.
agree to that.
And I agree to
agree.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm leaving it in.
So dare I ask, town clerk, did you get all that?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty good, and I have a recording.
So just to be clear, that was a lot of numbers and a lot of stuff that if you don't have the ordinance right in front of you. Nathan, did you have a question or comment? Oh, yeah, he's your guy. Again, what we're talking about doing is a first reading. This is not approving an ordinance. This is potentially acting on new revised language of an ordinance that will still be acted upon at a future meeting date. So we do have a motion and a second on this motion.
Mayor, did you want this date specific? Or no?
Well, let's see if we have to worry about a date specific. If this doesn't pass, we don't have to worry about it.
Okay. All right. You ready?
So, want to make sure our town attorney is, you good with everything?
Yes, I believe as long as it's clear what the motion is and all members understand, yes.
Okay, so with that, please cast your votes.
No.
And so now the new ordinance does pass 3-2. So with that, we will have a second reading of this ordinance before any potential adoption of this ordinance. And I would ask that the record reflect that that second reading be held at a regular meeting on June 6th. And in the meantime, if any members of the public want to continue dialogue either with the council or staff, feel free to do so. Again, we have staff waiting to receive your contact information so that we can make sure that you're included on any correspondence. Thank you again on behalf of all of us for this very thorough process. It's not quite over. We're not sure what's going to happen on June 6th, but we all appreciate your feedback and helping us make what hopefully is the best option possible. So thank you. I'm going to ask that we take a 5-minute comfort break and clearing of the room break. And then please honor that 5 minutes. Please be back in your seats by 8:30 at the latest. And we are going to reconvene our council meeting now that we've completed the items on the consent calendar. Now we're going to move ahead to the first of our two public safety quarterly reports. I thank the patience of both our CAL FIRE and our Sheriff's Department representatives that are with us this evening. So we're going to start with CAL FIRE, please. I know you just showed up and these guys have been here all night.
Yeah, I know.
never fails if you get a call. You
I
know.
wasn't late. Okay, well, good evening. My name is Jason Martin. I am newly assigned to Battalion 16, which covers the town of Yountville. So I hope to take some time here in the future to come and meet each one of you personally. So over the last quarter, we've been busy like normal. We've run 484 calls out of the Yountville station, Station 12. And the call breakdown for the town of Yountville, we ran 83 total calls in the town. We had 67 medical aids, 10 public assist, 2 traffic collisions, 1 vehicle fire, and 1 structure fire, which was a kitchen fire at the Yountville Hotel, I believe. It's one of 2 that the station responded to. With the 484 calls total, there was 83 to the town, 252 to the vets home. In the surrounding county area, there was 144 calls, and then we provided mutual aid to the city of Napa five times. As mentioned before, we ran 2 structure fires during the last quarter, one being here within the town, the other one being at up in Rutherford at the Rutherford Grill. Both of them minor damage to both of the facilities. Well, I did forget one regular structure fire off of Galeron, and we received aid from St. Helena City on that one. As everybody is aware, it was a very wet winter and still going. I'm looking for spring. We were very busy. We work closely with our cooperators, Sheriff's Department, CHP, PG&E, road closures, tree downs, public assist, calls for service. We were very, very busy, but for the most part, limited damage to most of our community members. We had, let's see here, as far as CPR, which they wanted to mention, the last quarter they responded three separate times to the CPR calls, and all 3 times they were able to get a pulse back for the patient to be transported to the hospital. So that's very promising for our saves. Some of the special events that we participated in the last quarter was helped the Kiwanis Club do their annual crab feed here at the community center. And the winter months, January, starting in January, is when we start the volunteer fire academies, which is all the volunteer members from the 9 volunteer fire companies that we have within Napa County. And they start out of Station 12 because of the close proximity to the training tower. And they should be finishing up that training that they've been doing since January next month sometime. They have approximately 30 to 40 folks that are participating in that. They also did hands-only CPR for the community, which has been a very big success. Big thing we've been doing throughout Napa County. And we encourage people to continue to do that. And if there's an organization that wishes us to come out, we'd be more than happy to come out and provide that training. Let's see here. We have been doing quite a bit of walkthroughs through the community buildings. Most of the new businesses or the businesses in town, we do have quite a few new folks coming into Station 12. And so we're getting them kind of oriented with the businesses and some of the special features here in the town of Yountville. So you'll see those guys out more and more as it starts to dry up and the weather's nice and it's just nice to be outside. And then the safety message that we have, we just want to put out just another reminder. Now that all the grasses are starting to grow, we have some of the damage down trees from the winter months, is to take a look at your properties, clear back 100 feet if possible, cut down your lawns or your growing grass, and remove any of that debris and brush, just in the event of a wildfire. And that concludes my report. Any questions?
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Mueller.
Yes, I have a question. I think there's a couple more weeks, if I'm not mistaken, in the open burn season. And I have counted 28 very giant piles just south of town here. And you guys issue the permits for the open burning. Are you going to allow all 28 piles to go up in smoke on the same day since we have a very small window?
Well, actually, right now we have no jurisdiction. It's still under the Air Quality Control District that has the regulatory portion of.
And they told me to talk to you because you give the permits. I'm getting a lot of this.
I'm sure there is.
Yeah.
So not until May 1st. We can't, by law, we can't give them any restrictions. It still falls within the Bay Area Air Quality Control.
So
now-
you only cover after what period of time do you cover? This is new information.
So after May 1st, then we have to go out and ensure that the piles meet our criteria for fire safety. And when you see the big piles with the vineyards and stuff like that, they're regulated. They have to go through the permit process through the Bay Area Air Quality Control, and they actually pay a fee for the permit. And then they have a window in which they can burn. Sometimes when you see those piles sitting out there for a while, because it has been so wet, they don't want to light those piles on fire because they will not burn completely and clean. So you get a lot of low-lying smoke. So
Right.
we also encourage them to let their piles cure, if you will, so when they do burn them, that they'll burn nice and clean. We won't be inundated with smoke. After May 1st, they still may have a permit that they got from the Bay Area Air Quality Control, but at that point, we become part of the regulation for us to go out and inspect those piles, and then those piles have to meet our parameters in order for them to burn. And some of those parameters are the size. It has to be within a certain size parameter, plus they have to have equipment on scene, they have to have somebody there monitoring the piles the whole time, they have to have a water source, and they have to have the permit with them.
And you regulate, like there's 25 of them, let's say. You wouldn't let them light all 25 on.
And
Okay.
most of the vineyard management companies are very familiar with the process. They don't want to receive the fines from Bay Area Air Quality Control because their fines compared to our fines for fire suppression are typically much higher if they're negligent.
Okay, thank you very much for that information.
Any other questions from the council? No, thank you. We look forward to the next quarterly report that includes the security that CAL FIRE gave us at our Easter egg hunt last Saturday.
Did they do a good job?
We had no safety issues at all. We didn't have to call the other uniforms in. So I think your team was intimidating enough.
I'm sure they were. All right, well, thank you, everybody. Have a
Thank
good
you
night.
very much.
Yep, take care.
Welcome to Yountville.
Yeah, thank you.
And let's now hear our Sheriff's Department report.
Take care.
Sergeant,
I'm
welcome.
going to blame everything on you.
Yeah.
That's right. Good evening. It's up here where you can hear me. Well, I'll make this brief as I can. Our calls for service in the last quarter were 1,029 calls for service. As you could see, what I gave you guys on an Excel spreadsheet compared from this quarter to the fourth quarter of 2016, and then to look in comparison with the first quarter of 2016, because it does change. Calls for service and type of investigations, some of them are seasonal, just based on the weather. So, thank you. So we did have a few things changing this quarter. The crimes against persons, there was a small increase in simple assaults, but that could be something as simple as two people in a restaurant or a bar shoving each other. Typically, it's a pretty basic crime, if you will. Still, we increased pedestrian and vehicle checks fairly dramatically, 2 to 2.5 times compared to the same quarter last year. Crimes against property, when we'd be talking about petty thefts, grand theft, burglary, vandalism, it did decrease, but our patrol checks went up again dramatically. And just looking at the patrol checks, there's been a pretty good push. 2.5 times as many in the last quarter compared to the same quarter last year. We're trying to get out. I want myself and our staff to get to know all the business owners, the people that are working in the shops or the other businesses. I want us walking through. I want a personal relationship as much as possible so they're comfortable talking to us. So we're trying to really get that instituted and doing it at night as well. The traffic collisions they increased. Our traffic stops have increased by 3 times. this quarter compared to the same quarter last year. You might have seen a few lights out there on the streets of Yountville. And that was in response to requests from yourselves, town staff, residents. A lot of it has been a pretty large education push. You will see, I'll kind of tie in, I'm going to move past this, but I will move into the communication efforts. We're starting a program. You've heard of Coffee with the Cops, I'm sure. I'd like to try that here, and our first trial will be in Rancho de Napa and see how it works. I'd like to do it for 3 months and then move it each month to maybe to Kelly's and some different places, move it throughout the week so people have a chance and they have a voice to come meet us, talk about concerns, ask questions. Again, try to build that communication and relationship with the community. Part of that is going to be public safety videos. I've been kind of working on this last quarter. Town staff has helped me posting them up to the town website, and with approval tomorrow or the next day I'll be posting one that's just under 4 minutes talking about education of stop signs and kind of going over what we feel and what we see when we think we've stopped and what other people see, you know, from the outside. So those are some projects we've been working on. We've been very responsive we're trying to be very responsive to what we hear from yourselves and from the residents, and so we're welcoming more feedback. Whatever you think, I appreciate when you guys do give us feedback, what you like and maybe what you don't like, so that we can hopefully serve you as best we can. We've been involved in a few different activities this last quarter. The Volvo new model reveal, Yountville Live, great time, and then the 5K. There's been some other things, but those are the main things. And I had a video for you, but my ambient noise was so much I'm going to save you from that. And you guys can watch the stop sign video if you choose to in the next day or two. And I'm open to any questions if you have any for me.
Thank you very much, Sergeant. Any questions? Councilmember Mueller.
I have a comment. I've certainly noticed your increased stops. I've heard from many people about your increased stops, and they've all been positive, and they are from me as well. Are you able to post either one of these on Nextdoor Yountville when you get them going?
So I've been doing that because
Okay.
I've kind of noticed that here, even at home, I constantly find myself, I stay up. If you guys are anyone's posting, I'm on it because I want to know what's being said. So I do. I use our sheriff's office account, and I put a link up to it. So it goes. We want to get everyone redirected to the Yountville website and using that website. So I will put a link. I notify them, hey, we've got a new safety tip video. I tell them the title, and then I put a link. So I want to kind of train people to use our town website as much as possible. So they're posted there, and then there's Priya helped. We put a little archive button below whatever the current video is. If you want to go back and see what other videos there are, you can click that and see other videos. And hopefully they will progressively get better and better in quality.
You'll be a movie star soon, it sounds like.
We'll get you a lava
I'm trying to
lamp.
get some other people like Mr. Tagliabashi and other people in the videos to not always be in there.
We're having some fun, but we are sending the little links out using Facebook and various things next door so that people know. And we're also trying to do some different things on different issues that we can try to do. So we'll take some of that, including, all of our general communications and outreach.
Well, thank you for the support of our website also to help kind of train folks in how they're getting their information and just being that engaged with our community. That's something that we always look forward to with our public safety folks.
Actually, I did have one more comment. I wanted to talk. Steve Rogers did have me working on a binder, a deputy resource binder, right, so that I came in and there was some learning curve as every time we have a new sheriff or sheriff sergeant here. And putting that together, I have to be honest with you, initially I was questioning how important that would be, and through the process, I love it. It's great because now if I'm gone on vacation or we hire overtime, I can literally, if I'm not right there, we've digitized it, we've made it very accessible, so any deputy can come here if they have a question about how we operate in Yountville and whether it's forms, how we like things done, it's tabbed, they can go right to it, it's indexed, and they can see how we do business. And so kudos to you, great idea, and I'm glad now that we've accomplished that. So.
Well done.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And thank you both for enduring more time than you normally give us on a Tuesday night. But thank you for being here. Let's move quickly to our public hearing tonight related to Hotel Yountville.
Good evening. Tonight you have before you a development agreement for Hotel Yountville, and it would be with the buyers that are in escrow for the purchase of that property. And it would give them a level of assurance to the future hotel uses so that hopefully it could lead to the successful close of escrow. And it really is a cleanup effort, and as I describe some of the history of the project, that'll help explain it a little better. So the hotel is located on 2 separate parcels. The original hotel was approved in 1996, and it's on the parcel that's zoned residential scaled commercial. And the hotel expansion, which was approved in 2006, is located on a parcel that is zoned planned development. When the hotel expansion was approved in 2006, there was a condition of approval that the 2 parcels be merged. And this is important so that the separate parcels cannot be separately and independently sold and potentially put to separate uses. But it was also to recognize the approved uses and really the long-term operation of the hotel. So a couple different uses. So the condition remains unsatisfied, and this development agreement would include as one of its terms that the merger finally be completed. Upon merger, there would still be 2 separate zoning districts for the parcel, one of which would be the RSC and the other which would be the PD. And that itself is an item of concern for the purchasers because the hotel use on the original hotel parcel is a prohibited use in the zoning ordinance. And that was an amendment that was approved in 2011. And it was never intended that the hotel would become an unapproved use or that they would not be permitted to rebuild upon catastrophic loss. And so what the DA would do is to recognize the built condition and recognize the legal nonconformity of the use, but to allow it to be rebuilt should something happen. And the buyers are very interested in seeing this term included in a development agreement. On page 2 of the staff report, it explains a little bit more in detail what the main goals of this development agreement are, and they're basically to provide for the continued use and operation of the hotel and its ad-built condition, and to really establish all these different zoning ordinance and design ordinance elements as to setback height, etc., and to effectuate the merger of the 2 hotel parcels as was anticipated. So the town attorney's been working with the attorney for the buyer, and they've worked out all the terms amongst themselves, and we are proposing the waiver in the first reading tonight, and the attorney for the buyer is here as well.
Thank you. Any questions of the staff report before we get into the public hearing? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. I'll invite if the representative of the applicant would like to come forward.
My name is Ben Whitehill. The law firm that I work with represents Ashford Yountville 2 LP. You may recognize the name Ashford Yountville LP. They're also the owners of Bar Desino. There's really not a lot, unless you guys have questions for me. Sandra did a pretty good job summarizing everything. Basically, what our client wants is just to make sure that they're putting a substantial investment into the town, and they want to make sure that that investment is protected by having the ability to continue using the property in its current as-built condition. I will say that we discussed doing a rezoning of the property to bring it all within the planned development zoning district, but I think because of the current change to the general plan, we decided to hold off on that until the general plan has been finalized, and then at that time come back and seek a rezoning so that everything can be done into one parcel.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of the applicant's representative?
And just to be clear, that doesn't affect the merger, so the merger will be done now. The zoning will stay different until the general plan has been finalized.
And Question, Councilmember Mueller?
So one question I've had that's come from the residents at Gateway Mobile Home Park. It's regarding, and I just want to do this so that they can hear the answer. The portion of Champaign Drive that goes from Washington Street to Hopper Creek, that is town-owned street. Is that correct?
That's not correct. That's actually
Okay.
that's a private drive that is maintained by the owners of Parcel 3, which is where the Hopper Creek apartments are, and Parcel 2, which is where the
Hotel is.
Hotel Edition was done in 2006.
Right, okay.
So basically, right now it's owned by the same people, so they just maintain it themselves. But that is a private drive that
So that's Ashford property
it will be. Yes.
when escrow closes?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
But I
Thank
do
you.
want to clarify that there is an easement so that everybody in Gateway understands that they will have the right to continue to access Gateway.
That's also correct, and nothing will change. I mean, the easement was granted, I believe, in the plat for the property when that was done. I think the plat was filed in 2008, and so it's explicit on the plat that there is an easement there, and the maintenance obligations on that plat as well.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant's representative? No? Thank you. Any other members of the public like to comment on this item? You wouldn't want to miss any one of the items, Pam.
Pam Reeves, 6887 Jefferson Street. I don't have a comment. I read all of the materials, and I have a question about what current as-built condition refers to, and I'm particularly interested in whatever approval or not approval of an expansion of the restaurant and the parking agreement that went along with that. Is that part of this agreement, or is that now on the table for some other time?
Is that your only question? Because I'll have all the questions.
That is
at the
my
end. Okay.
question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Steve?
I'll have Sandra clarify, but the short answer is the as-built condition is what's approved and what's operating. The answer to your question is the property has been approved to have expanded, open to the public. They have not perfected the conditions by which to do so, so the new property owners still have the requirement to provide the parking in order to open to the public.
And that's separate from this.
And that would be separate. That would come before the council again?
It depends on how the council has previously approved an agreement, and that would be up to the parties, the council and the parties, once this is approved, but it's not included in this. This is simply, when we refer to the as-built, is what's built and what's in the existing conditional use permit approval.
So this does not allow the spa, restaurant, or lobby bar to be open to the public unless they satisfy the parking requirement. Previous property owner in the town had reached a concept solution that was not signed, so a new concept solution would still need to be signed by the new property owner with the town for those conditions to change, if that makes sense.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, let me just see if there's anyone else in the public that wants to comment first. Nope. Okay, so
To discuss the as-built condition again. I think one of the attachments here is a site plan that we had prepared. It's based off of the survey that we have prepared for this transaction. The survey is a standard ALTA survey, which it has a substantial amount of detail, shows heights, distances from streets, easements, all recorded documents against the property. So basically it just shows the property exactly as it's been constructed, and that is what we are referring to as the current as-built condition.
thank you. Any other members of the public? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and return for council discussion and potential action. Who would like to go first? Councilmember Mueller?
I have no reservation in approving the ordinance.
Councilmember Dorman?
So I want to know which of you all made my computer bug out right now before I was able to look at my annotated 23-page document. This is what I want to know. But luckily I have some handwritten notes here. So I have already talked to our town attorney about this, but I'm just going to raise some issues in passing and then get to a conclusion remark. So as-built condition, my question to him was, if it has to be rebuilt 20 years from now, is it to the code then or the code now? And it's to the code now. And I think that's fine. It's just something we need to be aware of. We're giving up the right to enforce building codes down the road. The use permit, I would ask that the use permit be attached, because we have kind of a passing reference in here to the use is going to be for a hotel and a bar and this and that, but I would ask that we attach the use permit. Section 2.2, it has some language in here that if there is a catastrophic event and rebuilding has to occur, it says that can occur without having to submit any application to the town or obtain any town approval or use permit. That kind of bothered me. 2.4 and 2.5, that talks about what can and cannot be enforced against the property and the project. And my idea on that was to simplify those, to simply say the town has all powers that are reserved to it except for the following. Because the way it's set up now is it says we can do this and we can do that. I'd rather have it broader to say we can do everything except what's prohibited by this agreement. 4.1, I just point out that before we can declare a default, we have to give an extra notice and do a hearing on whether or not there's compliance with the agreement, which will add another 15 or 20 days to try to trigger any default. 6.1, it has, and I understand this is for the lender, but it says that we cannot, there's somewhere in here, and again, sorry, really my computer did glitch out right now. There's somewhere in here that says the mortgagee must consent to any termination of the agreement. And I had a problem with that, saying what mortgagee is ever going to consent? If we have a bona fide right to terminate the agreement, I don't think we should have to ask for a mortgagee's consent. On Article 7, I understand from our attorney that we have to put in some findings under various laws. I would just encourage us to not put flesh on bones where the flesh might be sort of what we think versus what we really must say. And one example I pull out is on 7.2, where it talks about the continued operation of 25 workforce housing units well in excess of that required for development of the project. I think that's more of an opinion. I don't know if we want to make that kind of statement going on. And I think that's about it. Those are the high points of what I discussed with him, but after all was said and done, I asked him if he felt that the document gave us the protections to which we were entitled and that we needed to have to go forward with this. He said they did, so I will leave it at that.
Councilmember Durham?
Just to piggyback on one question, why does explain the use permit in all this being attached to this or not being attached to this?
Well, the use permit is separate and enforceable from this already. Right. And so at the beginning it talks about the permitted uses, and I can pull up the exact section here, including the project in section 1.1 in the definition subdivision E. and that encompasses some of the uses that are in an existing use permit. I would add, though, that one of the express reserved powers of the town in this agreement is to impose new conditions on any new use permit or any amended use permit. So to the extent that use permit comes back in for an amendment in some kind, as long as it doesn't change the as-built condition of the building for the permitted use, which is this here, new conditions can be placed on any new use permit or amendment to a use permit. So that's still a reserved power. So because the use permit is enforceable and standalone, and that reserved power was included, the use permit's not expressly incorporated into this.
Very good. Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
No, I'm confused now because of Councilmember Dartmouth, but no, I have no difficulty with this at all.
And I'm fine with it also. I do understand however many attorneys you have look at a document, you'll have that many ideas of what the exact wording should be.
And realtors.
Yeah, we have gone over this development agreement several times over the years, and I think our interests are protected correctly, fairly, appropriately, so I have no problems with this. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion verbally to introduce and waive first reading of ordinance number 17-461, approving development agreement with Ashford Yountville 2 LP for Hotel Yountville located at 6462 Washington Street, APN 036-090-026, which is the original hotel parcel, and 036-090-038, which is the hotel expansion parcel.
Second.
Introduce and waive the reading, I think you said.
Oh,
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, he did.
Okay. Motion and second. We'll be casting our votes now, please.
Yes.
Yes.
And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you for being here this evening and getting to watch all the local government action.
Are you sure? I was pretty sure I saw somebody nodding off back.
All right, thank you. Thank you for being here this evening. Let's move, we're getting pretty late into the evening. We have a couple of administrative items. Hopper Creek Bridge Railings Project.
I've been waiting for this one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Tonight we have for your consideration adoption of a resolution to award the bid for the Hopper Creek Bridge Railing Project. It will approve a construction contract in the amount of $90,632. The approved budget at this point is $90,000. We are also asking for a budget adjustment of $632, which will also come out of our CIP contingency. I have a small contingency in the CIP, and allowing the authorizing the town manager to execute the contracts, change orders, and amendments up to that budget amount. June 16, 2015, the council approved our 5-year capital improvement program, which included the Hopper Creek Bridge Rail project. This program had been under development basically since 2010, when the Fennell Bridge railing was improved to meet the most current standard. This particular project took a little longer to work its way down the list. With the adoption of the strategic plan in 2011, the council made street maintenance, which includes the town's bridges, a priority. The town owns and maintains several Hopper Creek bridge crossings. Most of these bridges were conducted in the 30s, or in one particular instance in the 50s. As these bridges reach a 65-year service life, the evaluation of the decks, railings, and bridges, and all of the infrastructure evaluation is needed to assure the necessary compliance with the current design engineering standards and the ADA access standards as well. The staff identified 3 bridges in need of review: the Washington Street Bridge, the Jefferson Street Bridge, and the Yon Street Bridge, all at Hopper Creek. Initial review by our consulting engineer found that the Yon Street Bridge had adequate barriers and the pedestrian access that is required at this time. In March 2016, we contracted with RSA to perform some engineering designs and complete construction plans for the bridge barriers. Consultation with the structural engineer and steel manufacturers led staff to believe the project could be manufactured and installed for the budget amount of $90,000. However, with the large variances in prices in the steel, the current construction environment, which is very busy and prices are escalating, we installed with this bid several alternatives that we could use to make sure that we would be able to accomplish some construction with the budgeted amount. As you can see from the numbers, I should say we solicited the projects on February 22nd, held a non-mandatory pre-bid meeting, including site visits on March 8th, and open bids on March 30th, 2017. Mid-State Barrier came in with the lowest bid. There were some minor errors in calculation, although it did not affect the material errors in the bid package. As you can see, the base bid from your staff report, the base bid was the original material that you see on the Fennell bridge, which is a Core 10 material. It's a rusted, it kind of has a rusted, they call it weather steel is what they call it, or Core 10. And that is a very expensive material apparently. We have done a little bit of investigation, and as I said, we worked with with one of the manufacturers, and they recommended a Natina material, which has a similar look and feel to the Core 10, and it's a much less expensive material to use, as opposed to mild steel, which is even less expensive. However, mild steel will have some rusting. It probably would have a much less of a service life, and for that reason, we decided not to recommend the mild steel. So in tonight's bid, we're recommending the Jefferson Street railing with the Natina steel finish, and that would be for $90,632. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions, staff report? One question I do have, Joe, is what happens with change order costs or any potential overruns if you're only asking for that minor adjustment?
So we've already identified several areas where we're going to work with the contractor to value engineer the project, including some traffic control and some other modifications. We believe that we're going to be able to use that value engineering cost savings to cover any contingency we may have.
Okay. Seeing no other questions of the council, any members of the public want to talk about this? Why would you stop now?
I just wanted to check in, Pam Reeves, 6887 Jefferson Street. I just wanted to check in about the Jefferson Street Bridge because at the time it was first brought up, several of us spoke about trying to make it not too modern and to match the Old Town feel versus what is on Hopper Creek at Fennell. So I don't know if you talked with the bidders about that or what the design is going to look like.
So the design is going to be very similar.
Yeah, that's fine.
That question, I'm sorry.
If that was your only question?
Yeah.
Okay.
The design is going to be very similar to Fennell, and the reason is the regulatory, there's a very strict regulatory and design standard that we have to follow, mostly for the safety of cyclists and some of the pedestrians. So there wasn't a lot of room for us to wiggle on any of that design. I would say that the one design area where we were able to provide some of that feel was in the choice of the railing material and also the curb. So we went away from a concrete curb and we're going to an asphalt curb. It's actually a much more expensive choice for us, it turns out, because the contractor doesn't really do asphalt. So for that small amount of asphalt, it's about a $7,000 extra. But that's what we are trying to do to make the design a little more with the rural feel that we heard people ask for.
Thank you.
So it's going to blend into the street better?
Pardon me?
It'll blend into the street better than the concrete would have?
Well, I mean, we would have made the concrete black. You wouldn't have really noticed the difference, but to be honest, we wanted to be a fair and transparent player in what we're trying to do, and with that, we talked with several residents, including Eric Knight, and they agreed that was a good fix and a good alternative.
Great, thank you. Seeing no other members of the public, is there action from the council? If anyone is making a motion, please do so verbally as well as pushing the button.
I move we adopt resolution number 17-3402, awarding the bid for the Hopper Creek Bridge Railings Project, ST0006. Approve a construction contract with Midstate Barrier, Inc. for $90,632. Approve budget adjustment of $632 for a total project budget of $90,632. And authorize the town manager to execute the construction contract change orders and amendments to the up to the budget amount.
I second.
Thank you. And please cast your votes.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Joe. Let's move on to records retention schedule.
Are you excited?
But I read it all. I'm excited.
I won't talk about it all, I promise. Thank you, Mayor. The item before you tonight is for consideration of adoption of a resolution approving the modernization of the records management program, including the records and information management policy and records retention schedule for the town of Yountville. As general background, the town staff has been working with Kaizen InfoSource to update and modernize the town's record retention schedule and records program, which has been in place since for approximately 13 years. The current record retention schedule was developed by prior staff and was also adopted by an entirely different council back in 2004. The 2004 records retention schedule was developed before the significant technology advances and the use of electronic records by the town. Staff has provided records retention timeline starting with fiscal year 2004 to the present to 2016-17, which the council during budget discussion and consistent with the town's strategic plan goals supported a comprehensive update to the town's records management program. The town entered into a contract with Kaizen InfoSource in October 2016, and Kaizen InfoSource staff has a combined experience of over 75 years in the field of information management and technology. The current project includes the following deliverables: records and information management policy and policy map, a glossary, retention schedule addressing both paper and electronic records, training staff to read and use the new retention schedule, department file plans for folder structure for new computer system, and business and functional requirements, and a request for proposal to be issued for a new trusted electronic document management system. The next phase of this project includes a request for proposal for the trusted electronic management system. Town staff will be presenting proposed purchase of this system during the budget workshop in May. At this point, I would like to invite Helen Streck with Kaizen to come up and talk about what a trusted system is and give you
welcome
information.
Thank you.
And thank you for waiting
No
so
problem.
long.
Mayor and Honorable Council, thank you for having me. One of the conditions of the state of California to have a trusted system is that its system is what I call the big S. You must have all the policies, the governance, as well as the technology. So the town made the decision through the city manager and the city clerk to do the governance first, and that's what's before you for approval. Then you buy the technology, and it works more efficiently. You put in the structure. It's a common structure, so not every individual does their own thing, and it makes it efficient. And then you can govern the electronic information based on the rules that we've built today. It's important for the town because more people are engaged in public service, more people want to know what you do. And it's important because now we can protect what's historical. And the goal is over the long term to make this public and put what is public out on the internet available to the community. But not everything is public. So we want to make sure we're able to distinguish and protect, and that's what we're doing tonight with starting with the retention schedule and the policy. As we go through the next year, we have to get the right system, we have to have the common structure, and we have to have the right
protections and security to define what is a record and what's not a record. So I wanted to bring that to you because the state has very strict standards. In order for you to do any future destructions of paper records, you have to be able to prove that you have a trusted system. So I'll pause there and thank you for your time, and thank the city manager as well as the city clerk for allowing us the opportunity to work with you.
Thank you very much. I'll just ask if there was any questions of that presentation very quickly. Did you have more, Michelle, for your report?
No.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Reeves, what would you like to say? Nothing? Okay.
I wanted.
You did. You did. You were so thorough and clear. Very good. So, council discussion or action? Councilor
I just have a
Norman.
question, excuse me, on the policy. When it talks about the scope, how does this dovetail, or will it just be a separate animal of some sort of policy about, like, this weekend I received some emails from people on my personal email, but they were about the rental registration ordinance. I forwarded them to my town email, but how does that need to be addressed in connection with this, or is this truly a policy of this is what a record is, and anything that on our server is going to be a record, and anything else is going to be a separate policy?
So I might defer to how you incorporated emails from the council members into this. My understanding is, to the extent it relates to a particular project, it may very well be kept for the minimum retention periods that are within the policy. Certainly would be a disclosable public record.
Yeah, with the latest latest California Supreme Court ruling, anything that's regarding business, even if it's on your personal, is subject to a public records request and Public Records Act. So, but the scope does cover any business record, and that would cover that also. We have a lot of work yet to do, but, so we wrote the policy first.
So,
Good.
then that's my question after viewing the lovely cargo container at the Muni Ops.
It's so much better than what it used to be.
I know.
It's a category.
At least it's not in the attic anymore. So this will set in place to remove that and to have this all stored properly, correct?
Yes, that'll be a phased approach. Once we work through this process, there will be a point that going forward that we will start with implementing the records retention schedule into the electronic system, and then after we get our current information going forward, then we'll have to set up a strategy to get all the older stuff set up and scanned and indexed into the system.
As the professional, what do you see that timeline as?
Well, it also falls back in how much money you give them to work with in the next year, but it's usually a 2 to 3 year project. Because we want to get the system in, and we want to get it right. So I've said this to the city clerk, you want to do a pilot first, and that takes a good 6 months. So to get all of the town departments in is about a 2 year project.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Any additional discussion? Is there a motion? This council. Okay, thank you.
Oh, good.
We wanted to include Maria in this tonight anyway.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 173403, approving modernization of the records management program, including records and information management policy and records retention schedule for the town of Yountville.
And I'll second.
Thank you. Please cast your votes.
Yes.
That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And thank you for your
Thank
patience
you.
this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, home. Bye. Safe drive.
Okay, we're going to move on to staff informational reports. Are we going to, let's start with the first one. I was just, yes.
Let me get them. Thank you, Sam. So
This is a quick and short report, and I can elaborate more if you would like. So annually, we come to the council, as we're administratively allowed to do, with an administrative update for the master fee schedule. So the master fee schedule language specifically says that town staff has the authority to increase fees by CPI, which comes out every year in February. So in your report, we've attached a revised master fee schedule, just updating you on the new master fees based on the new CPI, which has turned out to be 3.3%. So this item is really informational in nature, as the council in the past, through legislative process, has allowed staff to do the administrative update. There are no fees in here that exceed the 3.3%, and the attachments have two columns, one which is showing the existing fees, and then the new fees that we're going to transition into.
Great.
Any questions or comments?
Any questions? Yes, Vice Mayor?
Yes, does this schedule include the fees for what we took out of the other ordinance,
We will update the master fee schedule to reflect the legislative action the council takes. So if you take things out, we take things out. That's part of our, that's the beauty actually of the administrative update, is we can go do that and not have to come to you and say, is this okay? Because you technically do that by changing the ordinance at that time. So we'll do that, yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Welcome.
Consider your
Thank you.
report received.
Great.
Underpass mural update. We have that big scissor lift sitting out
Really
there in the
quickly,
park.
I don't have slides for you this evening, but the mural project is slated to start on Thursday. Very exciting. Our muralists arrive tomorrow. We have the reception to welcome them at Jessup Cellars, so hopefully RSVP'd for that. And they will officially begin out there on Thursday, doing mostly gridding, and then by Saturday they'll spend a few hours during Art Sip and Stroll installing the first levels of color. So be prepared to see lots of interesting information coming out through all of our channels, kind of chronicling what's going on and the mural going in. But we anticipate within 4 weeks we will have a complete piece of lovely art in our underpass. So thank you.
Great. Unfortunately, I will be missing that. I'll be in Sacramento for Legislative Action Day tomorrow and Executive Board meeting for the League of California Cities. So maybe I'll be looking at our new online. We don't have the camera going yet.
No, we don't have a camera, but we're going to be doing some Facebook Live stuff as well. So hopefully you guys can catch some of that if you're. I'll try to do Facebook Live from Jessup Cellars just for you.
Thank you very
Okay.
much. I'll look for it. Any questions about that? Yeah,
I think it'd be
Councilmember
really
Mueller.
cool. I don't know how much it costs to do a time lapse of the whole process.
Yeah, I'm working on that. Priya is really great at that type of thing, so she and I are working on that. But we will have the time lapse photography of the whole project. So absolutely.
Great, thank you. Strategic plan update. Fresh from 6 hours of it today.
The council spent a good portion of today reviewing the community input from 1, 2, 3 public outreach meetings on the strategic plan, as well as an online survey. And as the council knows, we've also posted all of the raw data and all the information on the town's website. But today the council, along with management team, took that input and you made changes. You made changes and thoughts based on your review and your analysis, and we'll be working with the consultant and being able to get that product. But the council worked on modifying the vision statement to reflect some of the community input, also adjusting some of the critical success factors, and then also as part of today's process, the council worked on establishing some priorities for the next 1 to 3 years for staff to focus on, consistent with your refined strategic plan. So I think
That's
that
good.
summarizes what you all did today.
Yes. Did you get, I can't remember what the timeline was for getting that complete analysis. Did they give us that?
I want to say we've got a couple weeks, and then we'll have a complete report, and then we will bring something back to you, most likely at the June 6th council meeting for a full formal adoption of the plan.
Great, thank you very much. Let's move on to meeting reports, comments. I do not have a report from flood control. Do we need a report from Upper Valley Waste Management?
Yes, we met, when is today? Tuesday. We met yesterday. Seemed like forever. One thing I wanted to just mention is that it was brought up by the county, because of trash trucks move along the street, that there's going to be significant paving along Silverado Drive or Silverado Trail, May 1st to June 15th. So that's coming up. They're going to try to do it from midnight to 5 a.m., but depending on weather and depending on lots of stuff. So anybody who's going to be heading up the Silverado Trail soon, watch for those signs. We're going to be working on our budget and the rates, and we should have some interesting, hopefully, information by the May 16th meeting, which we're probably going to not have. So you have to wait and hear about what your trash rates are doing in June. And the other big discussion item, the state has implemented SB 1383 for short-lived climate pollutants. These are pretty much organics, and so right now we have to keep at least 50% out of the landfill. It's probably going to go to 60 and then 80%. So we have to figure out a lot of way to keep a lot of trash out of the landfill pretty soon. So I'll keep you posted on the exact numbers. I haven't finalized those, and probably 60% by 2020, but we'll find out soon.
Other reports, Samantha, did you want to just mention Art Sip and Stroll that's happening this Saturday?
Yes, so this Saturday from 11 to 5 is the 5th annual Yountville Art Sip and Stroll, and we have over 48 artists joining us this year, and they're mostly regional and local artists. We do have a few traveling in from out of state, which is very exciting. We've added a beer garden and a great partnership. A great partner. Would you like me to repeat that, Siri? A great partnership with the Napa Valley Museum this year, so we're excited to be adding some event space up there, as well as in our almost open Veterans Memorial Park and the community center all along Washington Street, mostly up to Vandeleur Park, but a few of the North End tasting rooms are also participating. So our pre-sales are looking really strong, and I think it's going to be a beautiful 75-degree day here in Yountville. I think we're going to have a terrific turnout, so I hope you all can join us.
Thank you very much. And Joe, would you like to cut it a little closer on the removal of the fence at Yountville or Veterans Memorial Park?
I think we're plenty close enough, and the weather is cooperating, so I'm going to take that as a win, Mayor.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Sorry.
Just a second.
Yeah.
Also on Saturday morning, the Napa Rotary Cycle for Sight and Rotary Ride for Veterans is happening down at Justiniana High School, and we'll be passing by Yountville, raising money for the Enchanted Hills Camp for the Blind and the Pathway Home. And I believe there are a few of us that will be representing in the saddle that morning, and then come back for the Art Sip and Stroll in the afternoon. So yes, Councilmember Norman.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to pass on a report from our Library Commissioner, Scott Owens. He attended the Senate Governance and Finance Committee hearing on March 29th at the State Capitol. SCA 3, a bill introduced by Senator Bill Dodd, was heard, and basically the bill seeks to lower the local vote threshold for library construction bonds from current 2/3 to 55%. The bill did pass out of committee on a party line 5-2 vote, and our library commissioner, Mr. Owens, was among approximately a dozen supporters who spoke in favor. Those also included Senator Wolk and Supervisor Dillon, and the only opposition to the measure came from the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. Bill now heads to Senate Elections and Constitutional Amendments Committee.
Thank you.
I have one more.
Yes, Councilmember Mueller.
This Friday, mark your calendars, Shred It Day at West America Bank, 2 to 4. Weather is supposed to be 81 degrees. Bring anything you want shredded, and we'll have an e-waste truck there as well. 2 to 4, but I got to tell you, we have a lot of early birds in Yountville. The line will start at 1:30, so.
As in past years, I would just say come almost at the end, and then you're good to go. You'll just drive right through. Yeah.
Give away the secret. So, also, again, just a reminder, I'm going to be in Sacramento at the Capitol tomorrow, meeting with our legislators. And then on Thursday, I'll be on the League of California Cities statewide executive board for its meeting, also in Sacramento. And an update for the Yountville Elementary School Subcommittee. We met again yesterday and helped structure the presentation that we're going to be giving to the Napa Unified Board of Trustees on May 4th at a study session prior to their regular meeting. Samantha and I were chosen to be 2 of the 3 presenters of the information supporting Yountville Elementary. We managed to get some really good information that we can present to the board for their consideration of long-term sustainability and support for Yountville Elementary. So we will report back after that meeting of May 4th, and you're certainly all welcome to attend if you would like to and show support for our school. Yes, Vice Mayor?
Yes, tomorrow also Congressman Mike Thompson is holding a town hall on Social Security. It will be at 11 a.m. at Napa City Hall, and that should be an interesting, I will be attending that.
Very good. Any other reports or announcements? Seeing none, we do have a closed session item. Believe it or not, we do. It should not be very long. I do not anticipate any reportable action, but it is on the issue that is listed here, public employee performance evaluation for the town manager. So not anticipating any reportable action out of that. Thank everyone for engaging us in our meeting this evening. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, May 2nd at 6 p.m. Thank you very much.